Hello. Hopefully the mic sounds okay. Hopefully the music's okay. How's everyone doing today? Oh, we good. We got the closed captionings working as well. Welcome everyone. Hope everyone is doing okay. So I haven't had a whole lot happen with me over this last week or so. Met with my therapist on Friday and talked to her about the VA therapist thinking I don't have ADHD. My therapist that I see every 2 weeks, he's currently going through his process, seems to thinks I do, and also can give me a diagnosis as well. So I just started that on Friday, so I'm super excited about that, to get that done, because I'm really just excited to be able to start on medication. That is going to change. It's going to change everything, and so that's going well, hopefully. And I'm just a little bit stressed out at work. I've got a lot of work to do, and part of what I do is processing accessibility exceptions for software and books that other people within the university are using, and some of them don't like filling out the forms correctly, so they don't have the information that I actually need to do it, and it's strange. It sends me into this emotional spiral when they don't do that. So it's a me problem to an extent, but it's also very much a them problem as well. It's just about getting through. It's a new process, so getting them to fill it out the way it needs. It's gonna be it's a work in progress, and we're also working towards automating this process through something called ServiceNow. So that's something we're working on too. So that's really all that's happening with me. Sunday we're going to my parents' house for Halloween, not Halloween. Easter. We're doing that. So that's pretty much it with me. How about you guys? What's happening with all of you out there? My color doesn't look quite right because the camera's not cooperating today. I don't know. To get the sharp outline on my body requires this just crappy looking color. So I don't know. We'll get it figured out. Just relaxing? Doing well? Good to hear. Yeah, it's fairly nice here. I haven't been outside yet, but we're supposed to be in like the 60s, high 60s next week or so. So I expect it's gonna be fairly nice here. I actually went for a walk last night for the first time in a while, and I'll probably go for a walk today after I get done here. So yeah, it's pretty nice here too. My daughter has a friend over and they're playing, so hopefully they'll be fine till I get done with stream today. All right. So I was gonna go over Marianne Williams's policies, but I'm gonna wait to do that probably till next week. I'm gonna look over it a bit more, and then we just have a lot of. We're really just gonna be on the ProPublica train pretty much the whole day, reading the whole time here, because there's just a lot of articles that I have of theirs that are covering various things. Any questions or comments before we get started? Anything you want to talk about? Not the moment. Okay. Groovy. So the first thing we'll cover here is the TikTok ban. Well, it's not really that, but what they're calling it, the Restrict Act. And we have an article on this going over it and how really horrible it's going to be. This is it's going to be a big deal, because for some reason someone thinks that passing this or even proposing something like this is somehow a good idea. Let's get into this. Okay, Patriot Act on steroids. Left and right unite against fear-mongering TikTok ban. This is from April 2nd, so a few days ago. First off, let's be clear on one thing. The supposed TikTok ban bill, aka the Bipartisan Restrict Act 686, does not actually ban TikTok. The word TikTok does not appear once in the bill's 55 pages. The critics of the Restrict Act on the left and right are now sounding the alarm in rare alignment, calling the measure a Patriot Act 2.0, which opens the door to unprecedented digital surveillance of Americans and gives an appointed executive panel unchecked power to censor the internet in the US. Now we're headed for China. Even though the measure has been temporarily stalled in the Senate after it created a contentious rift in both parties, a number of bills are floating around with similar language. As might be expected, TikTok itself has been overflowing with user videos firing back at the legislation and its ilk, including those from conservative media voices, along with those from progressives like, well, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. I think her progressive cred is a bit tarnished now, but, well, your mileage may vary, I guess. Digital rights advocacy group Electronic Frontier Foundation issued a somber rebuke of the legislation Thursday, saying the measure fails to protect private user information. The supposed TikTok ban wouldn't ban TikTok, but could open the door to unprecedented digital surveillance of Americans. Okay, I hate when they have full quotes, block quotes that are repeats of something already said. It drives me absolutely bonkers. Like, really bonkers. Okay, anyhow. Due to the undefined mitigation measures coupled with a vague enforcement provision, the bill would also criminalize common practices like using a VPN or sideloading to install a prohibited app, EFF said. There are legitimate data privacy concerns about social media platforms, but this bill is a distraction from the real progress on privacy. So, I use a VPN just for privacy and keep hackers from at least intercepting my stuff directly to the internet. And I use it on my phone all the time. Actually, I use it on my computer too, quite a bit. I started doing that with my browser because I use NordVPN, and NordVPN has a Chrome extension which starts it up and gets it working for your browser. So that's pretty awesome. I don't think I have it operating now, do I? I don't think I do, no. But I do use it. And I also have sideloaded applications on my NVIDIA Shield because they didn't have default support for it. It's not so much that these apps are prohibited, it's just they don't have like integral support for them into the platform, so you have to load them differently. So I've done both of these things. And so it's pretty scary, but we'll get into it a little bit more here. Noting that the Restrict Act doesn't require the executive branch to justify its restrictions on expressive technologies like TikTok and limits lawsuit challenges to those restrictions, EFF condemned the bill's potential threats to free speech. Instead of passing this broad and overreaching bill, Congress should limit the opportunities for any company to collect massive amounts of our detailed personal data, which is then made available to data brokers, U.S. government agencies, and even foreign adversaries, China included, EFF said. This is a leftist stream? Yes, we are a leftist stream. I like to say I'm radical leftist, but your mileage may vary, depending on where you stand there. Currently, we're going through our first article, which is about the Restrict Act and the significant problems with it. After that, we've got a bunch of ProPublica articles we're going to go over. So it's going to be, I'm live for basically 3 hours. I just started here at 2 o'clock my time, 1400 my time. Then we'll go to 5 o'clock my time. So, yeah. We do a lot of climate change stuff. We do future tech and anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist, anti-imperialism, anti-US stuff here primarily. Green tech as well. Let's see. The bill's primary sponsors, Senator John Thune, Republican, South Dakota, and Senator Mark Warner, Democrat, Virginia, don't see it that way. I'm more right-wing, anti-war, pro-free speech, pro-liberty. Okay, all right. Well, I've had conservatives who have found some interesting things here, so I guess we'll see. We'll see how you feel about my content. In an email to Salon, Warner spokeswoman Rachel Cohen insisted that insisted the law would focus on restricting businesses that facilitate or abet specific kinds of harm, but not on individual users. This legislation is aimed squarely at companies like Kaspersky, Huawei, and TikTok that create systemic risk to the United States' national security. Well, the issue becomes here is that they can pretty much do anything and destroy anything or do whatever the fuck they want as long as they say national security, which is, Patriot Act got away with that, and just horrible violations of our actual individual rights to privacy and many other things. So if they want to help protect Americans, something like this isn't the way to do it, because it doesn't actually do what it is they're trying to do, besides give the government an ability to attack citizens for using a VPN or sideloading software just because they don't want them to do it. That doesn't appear to square with the actual language of the bill, although most of its legislative language is clearly geared towards controlling corporate mergers and giving the president a new tool that can force a foreign company to divest itself of U.S. interests. Okay, there's no specific provision that protects individual users of banned websites or software. Instead, it would give an appointed presidential committee power to make new rules and enforce them with little oversight. Shouldn't this be the purview of the FCC, honestly? It sounds like it probably should. How could those new powers pose a threat to individual users? First, there's a real possibility that, according to the current version, the individual user could face criminal charges for downloading or accessing banned content, such as through the use of a virtual private network. Depending on the appetite for enforcement, penalties could include up to 20 years in prison for using a VPN to access a banned site, and in some interpretations, up to $1 million in fines. So what is banned content? What content in this country on a federal level is banned? I don't think there's anything that's banned. Well, we could be talking, if they're talking about like hacking software or something like that, okay, sure, but we already have laws around that, so I don't know what is banned content. What is this? This is what I really need to know. What is that? Another threat is the lack of transparency and accountability. The bill grants the appointed committee that would decide which apps to ban. Okay. So banned content is going to be decided by this committee. Okay. The lack of judicial review and reliance on Patriot Act-like surveillance powers could open the door to unjustified targeting of individuals and groups. Right, and that's exactly what would happen. This would end up being used as a political tool for the most part, especially as broad as it is, especially when it's left to a political committee. President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, is stoked about the Restrict Act. In a March 7th statement, Sullivan said it would give the government new abilities to mitigate the national security risk posed by high-risk technology businesses in the U.S. and would strengthen our ability to address discrete risks posed by individual transactions and systemic risk posed by certain classes of transactions involving countries of concern in sensitive technology sectors. Troublesome phrase in that word salad privacy advocates suggest is individual transactions. Right. Across its 55 pages, the Restrict Act offers a lot of winding, tricky language with room for broad interpretation. Concerns are emerging about how the bill could threaten civil liberties and First Amendment rights, especially considering its vague language, lack of oversight for sweeping new executive, non-elective authorities, and the secretive nature of the FISA courts, which rule on a range of intelligence and surveillance cases. Well, all regimes are fascist. Every single president, every single leader of every single country in the world, especially the United States above all, has always been fascist from the very beginning. Because it's always been controlled by the 1% and the corporations. Oh, thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate that. I mean, just to be fair, Republicans tend to be 100 times worse. Maybe not 100 times worse, but at least twice as bad. Because Republicans are overt in their fascism. Completely. Democrats are worse in the sense that they have better marketing, and some people believe that Democrats, on the federal level at least, give a flying fuck about the people, and they don't. They're worse because they have better marketing. Well, that's an exaggeration. Not every country is fascist. Yes, no, every country is fascist. How fascist they are is your mileage may vary. Some may be less fascist than others, but every single country is controlled by corporations and the rich. Like the Nordic countries, I mean, they still are. They're a slave to an extent to the United States and NATO and what we're doing, right? So directly and indirectly they are. But all countries are fascist because capitalism. That's just the way it is. And the only way to get beyond that is to evolve to a socioeconomic system that does not have money. If you want, so I have my own policy site since you're new, and I've also been blogging about politics for over a decade. Here's my policies. If you want to see where I stand, if you really want to see where I stand, that's there. And if you kind of want to see the basis for how basically everything is fascist, this just gives you the fundamentals of it. It's a 10-minute read, really easy read. And The Cancer of Capitalism is my giant-ass post on the issues posed by capitalism, so you can delve into that. Turbo leftist then. I wonder how many leftist parents operate, if I give my kid a bedtime. No, that's definitely not what we're saying. Right? I've said nothing as obviously misrepresentative of what I'm saying. Said nothing about parents. I've said specifically the federal level, have I not? This is about corporations do own our parents, right? But that's not, they don't rule over how we raise our children, at least not directly. It's about corporate and 1% ownership of our politicians, of the government. That's what this is about. Okay. Here are the highlights of the Restrict Act that have already led to serious dissent. Oh, okay. I don't know who you are yet, so I don't know what there's no sarcasm or humor tag, so I don't know. Sections 2 and 8, appointed censors. Check out the segment about covered transactions. That little phrase is the fulcrum on which the entire bill hinge. Here it's identified as any merger, acquisition, or takeover that is proposed, pending, or completed on or after the date of enactment of this act. If the committee determines that the covered transaction involves a substantial interest in critical infrastructure, critical technology, or critical data of such person. I read your propaganda writings, but I don't endorse them based on what I've gathered. Okay, that's fair. I appreciate giving my writings a read. I appreciate that, but that's fair. Again, I consider myself far left, so especially if you're conservative, you're definitely probably not gonna enjoy what I have to say. But I appreciate giving them a potential read. So that's cool. Thank you. So this is left to an opinion and not actually left to like a law for how that's determined. Yeah, the openness is an issue, huge issue. Committee here means the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States, which would be appointed by the President and by statute would include the Secretary of Commerce, the Attorney General, the Defense Secretary, and the Head of Homeland Security. Okay, none of that is good. They would have enormous discretion to decide what a substantial interest is in critical infrastructure, technology, and data. Yeah, this is not a good thing. None of these people are good. Similarly, in Section 8, enormous power is vested, put into this new CFIUS and the Secretary of Commerce, and with an even more concerning caveat. There's not much meaningful judicial review here compared to the powerful CFIUS as to unwind or shut down those covered transactions. Yeah, this lack of oversight is a problem. Sections 5, 12, and 10, few judicial checks, lots of surveillance. Section 5's criminal forfeiture provisions are noteworthy, especially this part. Actions taken by the President and the Secretary of Commerce in the findings of the President and Secretary under this Act shall not be subject to administrative review or judicial review in any federal court. Okay, that's a problem, except as otherwise provided in this section. So, a primary problem with the way a lot of our laws, especially at the federal level, is some places where the president is above the law and others in the government are above the law. They cannot be held accountable for their actions. In my policies, I specifically write against that. In my, what do I call it? Unified Declaration of the Rights of Humanity. Declaration of the Unified Rights of Humanity. I talk about that in there. So no one should be above the law. Otherwise, they are above the law and they can get away with whatever they want for whatever reasons they want. And that's always a problem, period. Once they're above the law, they can do anything they want, and they will do anything they want, especially at this level where there's massive levels of corruption and, money to be made. This could limit the ability to challenge the panel in court by itself, and judicial accountability could be made harder since classified information would also be included in judicial proceedings. FOIA and public records access laws could be hamstrung here. The same concerns show up in sections 11 and 12. Section 10 would also let the Attorney General impose requirements on covered entities to provide technical assistance to the government for, you guessed it, surveillance purposes, again with no judicial review. Section 6, Patriot Act 2.0, gag orders, secret FISA court proceedings, public information blackouts, and special administrative exemptions. If that all sounds familiar from the post 9/11 era, you'll get where this is going. If you happen to know a first-year law student, have them read this and watch how wide their eyes get. If a civil action challenging an action or finding under this act is brought and the court determines that protected information in the administrative record, including classified and other information subject to privilege or protections under any provision of law, is necessary to resolve the action, that information shall be submitted ex parte and in camera to the court, and the court shall maintain that information under seal. In other words, evidence about a person could potentially be used against that person without them even knowing about it. So much for due process. Can the bill be fixed? Potentially, yes. When Salon asked Cohen to address concerns about the lack of transparency and accountability, as mentioned in the Electronic Frontier Foundation's March 16th statement, she said Warner would be open to amendments while insisting, "We don't believe this bill as written supports that concern in any way." Well, just the fact that we are reading it that way means that most assuredly, or like they are reading it that way, most definitely means it could go that way. And it would because of the inherent corruption of government, especially at the federal level. Whether the bill is worth fixing strikes some privacy and free speech advocates as a different question. Okay, so an ACLU, I'm assuming this is Twitter. This is Twitter. A ban on TikTok would violate First Amendment rights of Americans who use the app to express themselves daily. Okay, the ACLU has condemned the bill along with a previous version, a similar but distinct Data Act, and called both measures a danger to free speech. Blocking access to entire platforms would violate First Amendment rights of the estimated 105 million Americans who use the platform daily, the organization said in a March 23 release. Furthermore, the ACLU argues that banning TikTok is a bad idea in the first place and would clearly violate the First Amendment, in the words of Senior Policy Counsel Jenna Leventoff. Now, I myself don't use it. I have it, but I don't use it. I should actually do some live streaming on there. I should do, but I haven't gotten into that yet. Government can't impose this type of total ban unless it's necessary to prevent extremely serious, immediate harm to national security, Leventoff said. There's no public evidence of that type of harm, and a ban would not be the only option for addressing that harm if it did exist. Ocasio-Cortez actually joined the platform in response to the recent TikTok hearings. Her first video included her thoughts on the bill's lack of congressional oversight. Do I believe TikTok should be banned? No, she said. Well, okay, fair. Describing the legislation as putting the cart before the horse, Ocasio-Cortez called out the rushed nature of the bill after Congress's recent marathon committee meeting where members grilled TikTok CEO Xu Zhi. I read a little bit about his comments on this. Now, to be fair, I am concerned about Chinese control and surveillance and that sort of a thing on there, but it's a social media company. What data are they really going to get? Sure, they'll get data on our users, okay, sure, which is potentially problematic because of privacy and all that. But yeah, concerned, but not that concerned, I guess. Usually when the United States is proposing a very major move that has something to do with significant risk to national security, one of the first things that happens is that Congress receives a classified briefing, Ocasio-Cortez said in her video. I can tell you that Congress has not received a classified briefing around the allegations of national security risks regarding TikTok. Representative Jamal Bowman, a New York Democrat whose district adjoins Ocasio-Cortez's, stood outside the Capitol to lead a protest against TikTok ban during the questioning of Chu, surrounded by supporters who noted that Facebook and other platforms collect just as much data as TikTok. Bowman argued that TikTok has become a platform for small businesses and commerce, a crucial tool for generation of gig workers and side hustlers. And that's true. The only concern about TikTok is that it's owned by China or Chinese companies. That's the primary concern here. Bauman, who supports data privacy legislation that focuses on consumer protection, has become the voice of TikTokers on the Hill and now leads the push against a full ban on the app. He says he's willing to listen to national security concerns, but so far has heard a lot of fear-mongering and speculation and not as much actual evidence. Republican-led inquiries into TikTok and other social media platforms have been increasingly aggressive. Not all members of the GOP are on board. That much became clear on Thursday when a vote on the measure was blocked in the Senate amid an inter-party fray. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, for instance, has called out the Restrict Act for failing to actually ban TikTok. Hawley has a competing bill that he claims to do that. Hawley's a horrible human, if I remember correctly. Hawley, is that right? I don't remember. Not sure. Hawley tried to force a vote in the Senate on Wednesday through a procedural one that rarely works except as a reliable play for attention. Then there's Senator Rand Paul, fuck that douche, Senate's leading libertarian conservative who attacked the Restrict Act in a Wednesday op-ed for the Louisville Courier-Journal. He wrote that Republicans are driving a generation of young voters away from the party with an unpopular wedge issue. Okay, well, that's fair. Congressional Republicans have come up with a national strategy to permanently lose elections for a generation. Ban a social media app called TikTok that 94 million primarily young Americans use, Paul wrote. Okay, that's fair. On one hand, Republicans complain about censorship, while on the other hand, these same Republicans advocate to censor social media apps that they worry are influenced by Chinese, Paul said. We really want to emulate China's speech bans. Now, I don't want to agree with anything that he says, but yeah, that's a fair point. The senator's father, former congressman and presidential candidate Ron Paul, called the Restrict Act the Patriot Act on steroids, which is fair. The Libertarian Party's Mrs. Caucus also opposes the measure, saying it gives the government authority over all forms of communication, domestic and abroad. Okay. The Restrict Act is not limited to just TikTok. It gives the government authority over all forms of communication, domestic and abroad, and grants powers to enforce any mitigation measure to address any risk to national security now and in any potential future transaction. Right, it's too broad, it's too open, it's just too much. Fox News pundits have also been shooting holes in the measure for a week now. Wow. In a moment of implausible coalition building, Tucker Carlson played a clip of Ocasio-Cortez explaining her opposition, then agreed with her. Wow, this must be bad if Tucker Carlson is agreeing with AOC. Yikes. This is not an effort to push back against China. It's part of a strategy to make America much more like China, with the government in charge of what you read and see, and with terrifying punitive powers at their fingertips, Carlson said. Okay, that's fair. We've seen this before from the national security state again and again. Confronted with a foreign adversary, for example, after 9/11, the federal government uses the opportunity to expand their police powers over the American population, and they do it under false pretexts, and they do it quickly, he continued. That's true. Okay, actual truth from him. That's rare. Nice to hear. Fox primetime host Jesse Waters went after Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, for supporting the measure. Initially, Graham denied that and actually appeared not to realize that he was listed as a co-sponsor when Waters responded, "This is garbage." Graham was forced to eat crow. "I want to push back against China, but within a constitutional framework. You're right about that," said Graham. "You made these allegations, and I'll come answer better next time." Proper English is good. It's a tweet from the Libertarian Party, Mrs. Caucus, whatever that is. "The most abominable piece of legislation since the Patriot Act, and you don't even know that your name is on it. This is like rats scurrying off a sinking ship. Don't let up. Call your senators. This bill cannot pass." Wow. Even Alex Jones of InfoWars got in on the criticism. Whoa, thumbing through the bill text on his show this week and calling the Restrict Act the biggest power grab I've ever seen. The Restrict Act is just one of several measures that free speech advocates say could pose similar threats. It's an unusual moment on Capitol Hill in that bipartisan coalition that wants to ban TikTok may be overwhelmed by the bipartisan coalition that has concluded that's a terrible idea. Okay, there you go. That's a little bit on the horrors of the Restrict Act. Hopefully that will not get passed. All right, any questions, comments, or suggestions on this before we move on? Next, we have a whole bunch of articles from ProPublica. Anything? Anybody? It just happens to be that there's a bunch of ProPublica stuff popping up on Twitter onto my stream, so that's what we're covering. So this is Clarence Thomas defends undisclosed family trips with GOP mega donor. Here are the facts. In response to a ProPublica report, Thomas explained why he did not disclose lavish travel provided by billionaire Harlan Crow, but legal experts maintain the justice was required to make these disclosures. When was where's the date on this? Gotta be recent. Give me a date. April 7th. So yesterday. In a rare public statement, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas responded Friday to a ProPublica report that revealed that Thomas has, for decades, accepted luxury travel from billionaire Republican megadonor Harlan Crow and failed to disclose it. Thomas's brief statement acknowledges joining Crow and his wife, who he described as among his dearest friends, on a number of family trips over the years. He also defended his failure to disclose them. Early in my tenure at the court, I sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable. Any dealing with the millionaire, billionaire, corporate owner, or anything like that should be honestly disclosed, because there's automatically going to be conflict of interest at some point. Because, I mean, we all know that Clarence Thomas is a right-wing garbage fire and a constitutional originalist who is horrific, deplorable human being, but, you know, this kind of just deepens his deplorability, which I'm sure Anita Hill and so on can attest to. I have endeavored to follow that counsel throughout my tenure and have always sought to comply with the disclosure guidelines. 7 legal ethics experts consulted by ProPublica, including former ethics lawyer for Congress and the White House, said the law clearly requires that gifts of transportation, including private jet flights, be disclosed. If Thomas is arguing otherwise, the experts said he is incorrect. The Supreme Court spokesperson did not immediately respond to questions for Thomas about the specifics of the advice he was given or who he consulted. Yeah, this is pretty much the thing here. Who is man talking to? Who am I talking to? Wait, what are you talking about? We're covering an article here from ProPublica talking about Clarence Thomas and his corruption, I guess. How you doing today? BFC Hard R. We, who the hell is we? You're alone here. Well, I don't know. I don't pay attention. So we is me and my personalities, maybe. We can start with that. And maybe if some of you are joining me, maybe you could be a part of that we. I do talk to myself a lot, so I'm used to this. So we is me and whoever it is I'm talking to, whether real or imaginary. So yeah, so this year I'm sure is pretty much not going to be anyone of actual value who gave them any valuable advice beyond giving into the corruption and enjoying it. ProPublica's story Thursday revealed that Thomas had taken international cruises on Crow's super yacht, flown on Crow's private jet, and regularly vacationed at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. In one instance, Thomas flew on Crow's jet from Washington Dulles Airport to New Haven, Connecticut, then flew back 3 hours later. Oh my god. Thomas did not respond to detailed questions for that story. His statement Friday did not dispute ProPublica's reporting about his trips. It also did not address broader criticisms from ethics experts and other judges that by repeatedly accepting such trips broke long-standing ethical norms for judges' conduct. Widespread propaganda on children's video game website. Are you mental? This is gonna be fun. Well, in case your ignorance is too ignorant, Twitch is for a lot more than just video games. There's a lot of us here who also do politics as well. How are you mental coming here and saying I'm mental for using the platform for what I want to? You're the problem here, not me. And no one has to watch me, as you quite well pointed out. You don't need to be here since you obviously don't want to hear what I have to say. So, in a previous statement to ProPublica, Crow said that Thomas never asked for any of this hospitality, doesn't matter, and that his treatment of the justice was no different from the hospitality we have extended to our many other dear friends. A law passed in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the Ethics in Government Act, requires Supreme Court justices and many other federal office officials to report most gifts to the public. Justices are generally required to report all gifts worth more than $415, defined as anything of value that they don't repay the full cost of. Gifts are disclosed in an annual financial report that is made public. There are exceptions, and experts parsing the legality of Thomas's failure to disclose the travel have been focused on a carve-out known as the personal hospitality exemption. The exemption states that gifts of food, lodging, or entertainment received as a personal hospitality don't have to be disclosed. Okay, the law defines personal hospitality in a way that further limits the exception. It only applies to gifts received from an individual at the person's home or at properties that they or their family own. Okay, all right, that's okay. That kind of makes sense. ProPublica asked the 7 legal ethics experts about the exception and Thomas's statement. Answer my question. You know, just some advice. And if you want more followers, you might want to target audience on the website. Video gamers. Nope. No one is coming to Twitch to get a race. That's incorrect. By the many other political streamers out there who have hundreds of people watching them. Yes, I'm not popular, which is fine. I'm definitely not for everyone, but I'm definitely not for you. If you don't have something constructive to say here, you can feel free to go away, or I can block you. Either's fine. Either's fine with me. All said that the law's language clearly requires that gifts of transportation, such as private jet travel or cruises on a yacht, be disclosed, and said Thomas appears to have violated the law by failing to report them. Name calling. Good stuff. It just shows your level of sophistication. Lack thereof. Good one. You got me there. Zinger. I don't think you can make an argument that private jet flights need to be included under the statute, said Stephen Gillers, a professor emeritus and ethics expert at New York University Law School. It's absolutely impossible that anyone could reasonably interpret that exception to apply to private jet flights, said Walter Schaub, former director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics. Oh, that's pretty cool. Not in any universe. Richard Painter, who served as the chief ethics lawyer for the George W. Bush White House, said Thomas's explanation of why he didn't disclose the trips makes absolutely no sense. Painter emphasized that the exemption only covers 3 categories: food, lodging, and entertainment. Private flight jets would fall into none of those, he said. Justice Thomas likes to focus on the language of authoritative text, and that's not what he's doing in this statement, said Kathleen Clark, a legal ethics expert at Washington University in St. Louis. Thomas himself disclosed at least 1 private flight jet from Crow in his financial disclosure for 1997. He has not disclosed a trip on Crow's plane in more than 20 years. Reviewing other federal judges' financial disclosure filings, ProPublica found at least 6 examples of judges disclosing gifts of private jet travel in recent years. That's it. 6. Okay. In the Ethics in Government Act, Congress explicitly stated that the law covers Supreme Court justices, but Chief Justice John Roberts has raised questions about Congress's power to impose rules on the Supreme Court. Okay. The court has never addressed whether Congress may impose those requirements on the Supreme Court, Roberts wrote roughly a decade ago in an annual report on the judiciary. Justices nevertheless comply with those provisions. Interesting question. I don't know enough about that. Thomas's statement Friday does not cite the law itself, but rather disclosure guidelines for the judiciary. The guidelines elaborate on how the law applies to the courts and are issued by the policymaking arm of the judiciary. Thomas's statement refers to a March update of the judiciary's guidelines for financial disclosure. It is, of course, my intent to follow this guidance in the future. Of course, because it's not so much that. No, that's perfect, dude. That's perfect. Trolls are gonna troll. If I get annoyed enough, I'll block him. Just enjoy what you can. If you get annoyed, let me know and I'll block him. No problems with that. So yeah, he's only gonna comply because he was caught for the most part. Questions about Thomas's compliance with the disclosure law have come up in the past. In 2011, he announced that he was amending years worth of his disclosure forms because he had failed to disclose the sources of his wife Ginny's income. That's come up over the last few years as well. At the time, he cited a misunderstanding of the filing instructions. Yeah, bullshit. You're a fucking lawyer, you asshat. There is a flag on that play. Alright, so there you go. There's something about the corruption of Clarence Thomas. Any questions, comments, or suggestions on that? I answered them all? Okay. Good to hear. And the next one. Okay, so this one, another ProPublica one. When is this from? Oh, people, give me a date. Bitch, I missed it again. I did. It's right here. April 7th. Okay, so this is from yesterday as well. The lawyer comment, that is. Ah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and that's really it, right? He should know better because he's on the Supreme Court. He's been there forever. I'm pretty sure the lawyer. Almost everyone on the court is a lawyer. I think, is Kavanaugh the only exception? Maybe he's the only one who wasn't a judge. I'm not sure. They're all basically lawyers. All right, homeless shelters aren't equipped to deal with New Mexico's most troubled. Okay, so from an accessibility standpoint, sounded like he was a TikTok teen. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to. I mean, he's obviously conservative, which is a problem. Yeah, he could very well be. So, from accessibility is my work. That's what I do. The big issue with this text is color contrast. Sometimes it's hard to see the white text over the image. We see this a lot in things that I work with. Color contrast of text over images is always a big thing. So it's hard to read. Homeless shelters aren't equipped to deal with New Mexico's most troubled foster kids. Please see it for themselves. All right, the foster system is messed up. I don't have this in my policies yet. I need to write this down. I was thinking about a whole bunch of policy stuff this morning. I made some changes, but I need to do some research on this. Now, one of the issues with foster kids here is the foster system. I don't know what the stats are, but I can pretty much guarantee the majority of the kids that are coming from the foster system are coming from people who are poor, which, of course, predominantly of them are going to be from families of color, because of the systemic and structural racism within the system disproportionately casts people of color into poverty, right? We all know that stuff. So, and then these kids get taken from their families and they get given to these more well-off families. And then these families are given, thousands of dollars a month to take care of these kids. So to really prevent this whole thing, we need to eliminate poverty, universal health care, universal education, housing as a human right, daycare, universal daycare as a human right, you get rid of pretty much the whole problem with foster children. Because the thing that causes these children to be taken away, poverty, and all of the biopsychosocial effects of poverty, depression, suicide, violence, alcoholism, right? All these things that people who are suffering in poverty they're suffering with poverty end up having done to themselves. So you end that stuff, and then all this whole problem goes away. It just really shows that how much the system doesn't want to help people who are struggling. They give money to middle and upper class people to take care of kids from impoverished families instead of actually giving money to the impoverished families, right? It's super fucked up the way it is. And there's also, we've read articles about how foster children are very much abused in many cases. So the whole system is super fucked. Super fucked. Anyhow, we'll move on and read this. New Mexico places foster teens with serious mental health conditions in shelters that don't offer psychiatric services. When a crisis erupts, they call 911. This happens all the time, said one officer. Yeah, and mental health needs to be free as well as healthcare in general, right? And that's these children will have a lot of these issues because they come from families that are impoverished. And if you want to read more about that, I kind of talk about the epigenetic and issues with poverty. I facilitated a discussion kind of in my hometown with a few people on poverty. Have that? Yeah. So I'll put that in here so you have the links. Read more on poverty. It is absolutely devastating to families. And it's even worse to children, because children it's just bad. So you can read more about poverty there. Okay. Near the pumps of a gas station in Las Cruces, New Mexico, a teenager in foster care sat in the back of a squad car, sobbing and gasping for air. Her hands were cuffed, and her legs were bound in a wrap restraint to prevent her from thrashing about. A protective foam helmet covered her head. Jesus Christ. Police had been called to find her after she ran away from a nearby youth homeless shelter where she had been placed by the state child welfare agency. Yeah. It was at least the 16th time in 6 months that staff at shelters had called 911 about the girl, including 5 calls for suicide attempts or threats. Jesus Christ. This time, police caught up with her and another runaway foster child at the gas station. So I wonder... So yeah, I'm wondering where all this comes from. And maybe there are issues at the shelter itself. I mean, they don't have the people to take care of her because they don't have this psychologists and social workers on staff or something like that. But I wonder if there were issues there of abuse or something like that as well. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they say. After officers put the 16-year-old in the back of a police SUV, she became agitated, started kicking and hitting the vehicle. Officers expressed frustration about having to deal with yet another child in the custody of the state, Child, Youth, and Families Department. Right. And that's exactly right. So when you look at I'll go ahead and pull, I have a blog post on my policy site. It's the only one I have on here because I want all my blog posts on my blog, but I have one here. This is on the defund the police movement. I talk about that in here. And in a sense, the issues that we're seeing here would be, in a sense, dealt with by defunding the police, by that movement. Shifting the billions of dollars that the police are getting to handle stuff that they don't know how to handle. Who should be going to these to deal with this child shouldn't be the police. It should be a therapist. It should be a social worker. It should be someone who actually knows how to deal with it. So this is really another way of looking at that. The way that they're organized there is not doing it correctly. They need to defund the police and make sure they've got the social workers on staff, psychologists, psychiatrists on staff to help deal with this. And just to have to deal with this is a symptom of the larger problem, much like we talked about earlier, that poverty is the primary problem. So if they deal with the poverty issue, a lot of this will go away, right? But again, they don't want to do that because there's no money in doing good for people. It's much better to make money off destroying people's lives for fun and corporate profit, right? It just creates another way for businesses and the rich to say, oh, we need more police officers, right? Which the Biden administration, of course, supports because he's a corporate piece of shit. Instead of actually doing something to deal with poverty and the suffering that there is from inequality in this country, he says more police. Not more funding for healthcare, not more funding for mental health care, not more minimum wage, not universal housing, none of the things that will actually help the people of this country, but more funding for the police state, which, as the Supreme Court said, have no obligation to serve the public. They're not there to protect and serve. They're not there to protect and serve the people, the police. They're there to protect and serve capitalists. I don't understand why they do that, why they bring high-risk kids here and they can't even handle them, said Officer Lucy Milks, recorded by her body camera. Well, so Officer Lucy Milks, if you have a problem with this, it'd be great to look at your budget and say, hey, you guys are a bunch of fucking idiots. Start shifting shitloads of money to local healthcare. That's what she should be doing. The girl pushed and scratched Milks when she tried to handcuff her. That's when officers brought out the wrap restraint. 3 of them held the girl on the pavement, fucking Jesus Christ, and bound her legs. Her white sneakers poking out from under the dark fabric and reflective strips. Yeah, so this is, again, with my defund the police post, these officers don't have this training. One of the things I do talk about in my policy is that officers should have CIT training, crisis intervention training, which should give them the basics of how to deal with something like this. But still, police shouldn't be going to this sort of a thing. It should be a social worker, a therapist, or someone of that nature that has the ability and the funding to get them into an actual mental health institution or to whatever help they need. Housing will probably be the first part of it. Officers try to figure out what to do next. This happens all the time. One of the 9 officers who responded to the call said to another, "It's so frustrating." Okay, here she is here. Look at that, Jesus Christ. Yikes. A frame from a police body camera video shows a teenage foster girl in squad car after officers put her in a wrap restraint to prevent her from thrashing around. Good stuff. More than 1,100 times from January 2019 through June 2022, someone at a shelter housing foster kids in New Mexico called emergency dispatchers for help with runaways, violent outbursts, disorderly conduct, or mental health crises. So, this is a shelter for foster kids. I suppose there aren't enough people taking in foster children to help give them a decent life, so they end up getting put in this underfunded, of course, shelter, and this stuff sorts of happens. Oh my god. Many of the kids placed in these shelters by CYFD have severe mental health or behavioral problems, including PTSD and depression, yes, from biopsychosocial effects of poverty and abuse and all that sort of a thing. Shelters don't provide psychiatric services. Kids break down, get into fights, destroy property, threaten staff, and run away. Sometimes they say they want to kill themselves or try to. And this is so bad. In these moments of crisis, it's police and paramedics, not mental health professionals, which is exactly the problem. Searchlight in New Mexico and ProPublica set out to understand what happens when shelters call 911. We obtained nearly 6,000 pages of dispatch logs, dozens of call recordings, more than 120 incident reports. In addition, we reviewed 26 hours of body camera videos for 16 incidents that involving foster teens who appeared repeatedly in emergency calls. Videos show police arriving to find broken windows and doors, sobbing teens, and rattled staffers. Officers know little about the kids and have trouble getting guidance from the CYFD. They're often bewildered about what to do. Again, they don't have the training. Trying to figure out why, what we're doing here. Bernalillo County Sheriff's deputy told his supervisor after responding to a call at a shelter outside Albuquerque in October 2021. We're a little confused. Searchlight and ProPublica contacted every law enforcement agency involved in the incidents in the story. They didn't respond, declined to comment, or didn't take issue with our findings. Experts say encounters like these can damage a child's mental health for years. You think? Virtually every foster child is dealing with extraordinary psychological damage, and many have had run-ins with the police, said Tim Gardner, legal director of Disability Rights New Mexico. Dealing with law enforcement when they're in crisis, he said, just further traumatizes them. 100%. Kids like this are not supposed to be in shelters. 3 years ago, the state promised to stop housing kids in shelters, offices, and other places that don't provide the mental health care that they need, except in extraordinary circumstances when needed to protect the child. Why would a shelter be better protection for the child? CYFD has delivered on just a portion of those promises. Meantime, referrals keep coming. We've had countless conversations with the department to say, hey, these are not kids that should be in shelter, said Jenica Bustamante, a manager at my friend's place, the facility in Las Cruces that the 16-year-old ran away from. These are not kids that we can properly care for, that we can safely care for. Hey, mind, how you doing, man? Hope you're well, and the camera makes you look. Yeah, I know. I was having issues with it this morning, to get the green screen working, to get a nice outline over me. It kind of messed up the color. I tried to correct it as well as I could. I don't know. I was a little bit late this morning, and just the camera wasn't cooperating. So, yeah, I've got a little case of Smurfitis today. So, I'm honestly a normal color. It's just the camera. So we went over. How are you today? How was your weekend? Went over an article on the Restrict Act and one on Clarence Thomas through ProPublica. We're basically going to be doing ProPublica stuff for the rest of the time. We're currently going over an article talking about. It's just fair. An article on foster kids in shelters and the lack of mental health care in these facilities. That's what we're going over currently. At my Twitter account was just a whole bunch of ProPublica stuff over these last week or so. That's what we're doing. All right, Emily Martin, CYFD Protective Services Division Chief, said the department exhausts every other option before placing a child at a shelter. Doomer News. Yeah, woo! That's what we do here. Yep. The number of placements, according to figures provided by Martin. Well, actually, I haven't used this today yet, so let's do this. Gaming Mind. I can't even hear it. Yeah. There we go. Welcome. All right. The number of placements, according to figures by Martin, has dropped by about 40% since 2019. Last fall, the department has licensed 2 more specialized group homes, which they say offer expanded mental health services. So this is this is the fundamental problem. They're having more kids go into foster care. They should be looking to that, looking to solving why that is. It's the look upstream issue, right? There's people being thrown into the river, and we're trying to pull them out. We need to go upstream to figure out how they got into the river in the first place. So making more foster kid homes isn't the answer. It's figuring out how they got into foster care in the first place, which is, of course, not what anyone in government really wants to do, because there's honestly no money to be made in doing the right thing. And that's what my post, The Tension Within Methods of Exchange, kind of talks about there. Currently, she said, some 50 foster youth are cycling in and out of shelters in New Mexico. That's a small fraction of all children in custody of CYFD's Protective Services Office. In the gas station parking lot, a police officer asked the 16-year-old what she was doing in southern New Mexico when she was from Albuquerque, roughly 200 miles away. "There's nobody that would take me in," the teenager replied. Officers took the girl to a hospital. So what ProPublica should kind of really look at doing is taking a look at one of these cases and figuring out how the child got into foster care in the first place. Honestly, doing just profiles of children in foster care and then getting to the root of the problem. Poverty, homelessness, right? Racism, and all sorts of other things are the true cause of why these kids are in maybe having mental problems or maybe homeless and all these other things. And then doing a report on that and then summarizing it. I'm sure there's data on this sort of a thing already, but that's what we need to be looking at. Why are there kids in foster care? How did they get there in the first place, and solve that problem? Officers took the girl to a hospital for a medical evaluation because they had used force on her. She was escorted through emergency room in handcuffs. That night, she was back at the shelter. Jesus Christ. 5 days later, officers were called to find her again. Crisis, call, repeat. And this is, again, like we were talking about earlier, police should not be called for this. This should be a social worker or a psychiatrist or something, a psychologist. That's who should be going to these areas. That's a part of what the defund the police movement is really looking at, because the police shouldn't be called for this. They're not qualified to do it. Money should be, less money going to the police, shift that over to mental health care or poverty alleviation, universal health care, universal housing as a human right, and all that sort of stuff. And making sure that when there are cases like this, that the appropriate people who can actually handle the situation are actually go to the situation. Otherwise, police just make things worse. When kids break down or express suicidal thoughts, shelters call 911. When kids hurt or threaten others, shelters call 911. Shelter managers say they often have little choice. They are required to notify police about runaways so kids can be located or entered into a missing database. Kids in crisis often need to be taken to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Well, the evaluation doesn't mean jack shit if they can't get care. What's the point? I mean, it's good that they're getting it, but if nothing can be done about it, that's the fundamental problem. Nothing can be done because there's no money for it. They're not rich, so it doesn't matter. They can just die and suffer. Of the more than 1,100 calls regarding shelter residents, more than 460 were for physical violence, disorderly conduct, or mental health crises. That includes more than 70 calls for suicidal youth. At least 650 calls were for runaways. Yeah, exactly. It makes very little sense. It's just the nature of capitalism to not give a fuck about poors. 99% doesn't matter because we're not rich. So, we can be murdered for fun and profit. It's just really, it's just ridiculous. It's sad and it's devastating, especially to our children like this. None of these kids should be suffering like this, and it's enraging. Enraging! These records didn't always say whether a shelter resident was in CYFD custody, but managers of shelters involved in the vast majority of calls said most of their residents are foster kids. All the body camera videos reviewed by Searchlight and ProPublica involved foster kids, according to the police records. All one. Yikes. This frame from a deputy's body camera video blurred by the sheriff's department shows a foster child restrained on a gurney after he tried to run when deputies told him he would be taken to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation. It was the 5th time in 11 days law enforcement had responded to calls about him. This poor child is suffering, and this is what he gets. He gets the police. He doesn't get the care he needs. Doesn't really get a place to live. He doesn't get social support or psychiatric support or healthcare or anything. Just more trauma. That's what capitalism is. Trauma to the poors and all the luxury. Rugged individualism for the 99% and socialism for the rich, right? After police get involved, CYFD often moves the kids to another shelter, and the cycle repeats. The girl at the gas station was one of at least 24 foster kids who were the subject of calls from 3 or more shelters in the period analyzed by the news outlets. What the children need is a healthcare, stable home where they can stay and get the support they need, and they need psychiatric care and support. They need a community and a family to belong to. That's those things will heal most of these children over time. Not violence, not trauma, not homelessness, not changing all the time, but a stable environment with healthcare. In 2021, Bernalillo County Sheriff's deputy arrived at the Amistad Crisis Shelter in Albuquerque's South Valley after that same girl tried to strangle herself. Yikes. He was quietly telling another deputy that she was depressed. "You look familiar. Have I talked to you before?" Deputy Adrian Say asked the girl, her conversation recorded on her body camera. Say realized she had 4 months before when she had responded to a call at Amistad after the girl had cut herself and made suicidal threats. Christ. In that short time span, the girl had bounced around among at least 4 shelters throughout New Mexico and had been the subject of at least 8 calls to police, dispatch records show. This time, EMTs took the girl to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Yeah, she asked the deputy to fetch her stuffed animal first. It's just horrific. I haven't done a lot of reading on this sort of a thing, but it's horrific what these kids go through, and all of it's preventable, and none of it should happen. I considered looking at getting a foster kid, but we don't have room. We don't have another bedroom, and maybe you could probably, depending on the child, they could share it with my daughter for at least a little bit, but that would get annoying very, very quickly for everyone. I look forward to someday getting a larger house so I could possibly take in a foster child at some point, because we're doing well enough that we could definitely do that, but it's just a matter of having the space and providing an actual a safe environment with some privacy, because they're going to need that as they're adjusting and dealing with the horrors of the trauma that they've already dealt with, because they haven't had privacy, they haven't had stability, they haven't had a lot of things that society has denied them, in addition to the trauma inflicted them. Deputies responded to calls at Amistad for residents in crisis more than once a week, on average over 3.5 years, according to dispatch records. Every deputy in the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office the largest in New Mexico, has responded to calls at the youth center, said Undersheriff Aaron Williamson. Sometimes law enforcement must stay with kids for hours, unable to respond to other calls, as they wait for a CYFD employee to show up or tell them what to do, according to videos and interviews with law enforcement. Again, just another point of evidence where they shouldn't be showing up to this. It should be trained professionals to handle mental health crises. So now we're waiting. We're waiting for somebody to show up that can make a decision about the kids' care. Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Lieutenant Amy Dudowitz said in an interview, "It's a frustration and it's a huge concern for those of us who are answering those calls. Like, is this the best response that we have to offer?" That's a very good question. And that would be good if she would ask that of her local county government and her police, her police department people, and see if they can get funding for the healthcare people to respond to these instead of themselves because they don't have the training. You're asking the question, so go ask the question to the right people. CYFD gives staff 3 hours to respond in such cases. It's been over a year since the call for police reform, so what's taking so long? Yeah, that's right. Since the George Floyd thing, that was about 2 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah, it's been a while. So there were a lot of calls for that. In some places, a few places have passed it, but ultimately, the police state doesn't want that because the police serve the corporations. Hermit time is fun. Yeah, I know, right? And COVID makes it even worse because, in COVID, just you lose time so quickly. I don't leave the house. I go to the store maybe once every 2 weeks, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I've suffered with COVID time too, and it's just I don't know what day of the week is half the time. Yeah, I feel you. So, CYFD gives staff 3 hours to respond in such cases. Department spokesperson Rob Johnson said in an email, "Staff are almost always working on something else and could be hours away. That's why the department routinely sends a nearby case manager, even if that person might not know anything about that young person," he said. Yeah, I get 3 hours to respond, but they can't do what needs to be done if they have a time limit on doing things. Biden even promised, I think, to defund the police. Great president. Apparently COVID is also over. Yep, that's what I heard too. After saying Trump should step down as president because of the poor. Yeah. I read about that too. That's exactly right. He did say that, and then Biden didn't do anything for it either, which I didn't expect him to. Shit. I don't think he ever said defund the police though. That would be seriously laughed at. If you have a link on that, I would like to see that. That'd be pretty interesting. Because all Biden has ever done historically is give more money to the police. He's just really bad. Author of the crime bill that gave the 3 strikes rule and all that sort of things. A lot of my law enforcement laws are all of policies are all about undoing the damage that Biden has done to it, because he's done horrible things to people of color in this country. I mean, horrible things. Yikes. Okay. Even CYFD staff themselves sometimes call 911 seeking help. Over the course of 2020 and 2021, dozens of 911 calls were made from the agency's Pintree office, a complex in Albuquerque where foster kids sleep when CYFD can't find any other place for them. At least 14 calls for violent behavior, runaways, or mental health crises. At least 14 calls were for violent behavior, runaways, or mental health crises. Okay. Oxford comma. Seriously, people. Okay. Was wrong there in the beginning of the interview. Biden made it clear he doesn't support. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. He's very adamantly pro-police. Yep. And that's pretty much what any corporate whore will do. Their response to anything is going to be add more police to protect businesses and protect the people instead of actually solving the problem that created it in the first place. Especially when you're looking at George Floyd and crime rates and suicide rates and depression rates. The core driver of all that is poverty and inequality. And that's not something that they're ever going to do anything about because it doesn't serve their corporate masters. CYFD told Searchlight and ProPublica that was during the heart of the pandemic when shelters were limited in how many kids each could accept, but they acknowledged that kids continue at the office. Biden wants the police defunded so that the federal government can expand and overtake local police departments. You're fooled by the defund the police. Oh, you're 100% incorrect, dude. 100% incorrect. Living a huge, huge lie. Biden has had nothing to do with the defund the police movement. The what is it? The police in the United States are like the, I don't know what, the 46th largest military in the world or something like that. It means a huge, huge, huge part. The police serve the government, and they serve the capitalists, and they serve capitalist owners, right? He'd never want to get rid of the police because he owns them. That might be the New York City alone. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty insane how much funding New York has. It's billions of dollars. And if they took half of that and shifted that over to housing and minimum wage increases and healthcare and all that sort of stuff, there's basically a direct correlation. I talk about that in my Defund the Police post right here. Let's go and pull this up. There's a direct correlation between, as law enforcement spending goes up, social spending goes down, and therefore social conditions go down. Because there's plenty of studies that show that increasing spending on law enforcement doesn't actually reduce crime. Biden's campaign team was pro no defunding police, were they not? All the Democrat politicians, Kamala Harris, were encouraging instruction. No, they weren't. Both Biden and Kamala are very pro-police. They've always been pro-police. Kamala is one of the worst. She locked up people. She made sure people stayed in prison who were guilty. She hid the evidence to keep people in prison who were innocent. She had like a record in her state for the number of marijuana convictions. They're both very much pro-police. Don't let whatever right-wing nut jobber you're listening to make you think otherwise, because it's just propaganda. They're very pro-police because Democrats are conservatives. They're moderate conservatives, whereas Republicans are far right-wing lunatic fringe. I mean, they're openly fascist. Democrats are also fascist, but they just have better marketing. So don't believe that because you're horribly wrong. We can't fix every problem with money, though. We can almost everything. We need are more fathers in the home and to change the culture. And the culture cause of our culture glorifies violence. Yeah, okay, that's true. That both of those are, well, so we can't fix everything with money. The primary driver for all of crime and all issues we have throughout society is inequality. There's plenty of studies on that. If you go to my policy site and go to the books you need to read, I have there's several books there that talk specifically about this. All my policies are about the war on inequality. So you destroy inequality, get rid of millionaires, get rid of billionaires, get people out of poverty, and the majority of crime will go away. You see that in the Nordic countries, which are some of the most equitable countries in the world, right? There was a great video that we watched on this like last year. Like an LA county officer went to the Nordic countries and they were just blown away because a lot of the people in those countries never see their police officers. They'll see them once every few years, and that's it, because the crime is so low. Why? Because there's high levels of equality. So your first part is 100% wrong. Now, fathers in the home, how you deal with that is war on poverty, war on inequality. That can solve all that. This isn't just fathers in the home. This is about systemic and structural racism, which is where that thought comes from. But yes, having families stay together because they actually have the ability to, because fighting against racism and fighting against inequality. But yes, also you are right, at least on the last one, about our culture glorifies violence. That is 100% correct. And that is a big problem. A lot of that is through the U.S. military-industrial complex's propaganda machine, as they, because capitalists own the government, and one of the largest, most profitable industry is war and violence, right? So the four deadly industries: the banking industry, U.S. military-industrial complex, fossil fuel industry and the pharmaceutical industry. All those make billions of dollars by going overseas and destroying countries and stealing their resources, right? That's what Iraq was about. That's what Afghanistan is about. That's what pretty much every single U.S. military action is about. It's about making money that's what Ukraine is about. Ukraine is about raping the country for profit. Blackstone is going to be the primary investor. They are one of the largest investment companies in the world, and they're going to make billions and billions off the destruction of Ukraine and the rebuilding of it. So, yeah, isn't AOC the government? Well, AOC is she's interesting. I was very pro AOC when she first started, but now she's become one with the board. She does the marketing for it, but she doesn't vote for it. She's a union buster. She's pro-imperialism, right? You look at her leftist critics like myself, she's no longer left. She is an imperialist. She is a neoliberal now. She plays the marketing part. Like I said, Democrats have better marketing, and AOC right now, and the squad in general, the fraud squad, are now a part of that marketing arm of the fascist Democrats. Now, this is one of the reasons why Democrats are, in a sense, worse than Republicans. Republicans are overtly fascist and overtly corrupt. Democrats hide it better because they have a better marketing arm, and AOC is now a part of that. She may have started being genuine in what she was talking about. I believed her. But then as we get into it, you know, the kids in the cages, she was crying, but when she's in office, she doesn't care about it anymore. I mean, not in any real way, right? So, yeah. AOC +3, the squad, love wars, yes. You want to blow yours? Yeah, exactly, 100%. That's exactly right. Yeah, and that's the fundamental problem. And I've run for office too a little bit, for school board. Not such a big thing, but I worry about this kind of very same thing, that you know, we're out here on the outside of government in the process, and we have this, we can maintain our level of objectivity and rage towards these people that we don't know, right? But once you become a part of the system, you know them personally. You hear their arguments and you hear their reasoning, and you meet their family, right? It's very difficult to maintain your objectivity and to maintain your rage once you become a part of the system. Right, and I've really worried about that. And I kind of wonder what was going to happen with AOC when she became one with the Borg. Well, she became one with the Borg, so we know. So it's a very real issue. Even Bernie Sanders, it's the same thing, right? He in a sense, sold his soul for whatever position he has currently, and he isn't even able to do anything. So a lot of the respect and hope that we had on the actual left through the squad and Bernie Sanders has been absolutely devastated. Does your side give you flack for actual leftists don't, because we are all doing the same thing. All the deluded Democrats who are still on board with her, I mean, the people who are still brainwashed by the propaganda. I mean, I don't talk to people, but I see a little bit of it on the on Twitter, but not a lot. But yeah, the brainwashed Democratic masses do, but the actual leftists, we're the ones who criticizing AOC, the fraud squad, and Bernie Sanders for, you know, becoming one with the Borg. Yeah, I'm severely. Okay, I'll tell you how disappointed I am. On my blog, on my blogs about me page, I love AOC with all my progressive feels. That was on my blog in my politics section. I have since deleted that. I mean, it saddened me deeply to do that, because I had to, you know, really come to terms with the fact that she was lost and she'd become one with the neoliberal fascist government, which both Democrats and Republicans are a part of, because we have a one-party system, and we've always had a one-party system. That's never not been the case. Just a matter of which flavor do you want your fascism. Do you want it overt, obviously corrupt fascism and Republicans, or do you want the fascism with hashtag pride on it? So, once you get to the point of understanding that, it's even more frustrating, more angering. Know how fucked the system really is. How much we people have no voice, anything. Always the 1% versus the 99%. Every single day, nonstop. All right, CYFD told Searchlight and ProPublica that was during the heart of the... Okay, we already read that. One of those calls involved the same 16-year-old girl. In October 2021, she broke a window at the office building. CYFD staff called the police and urged officers to arrest her, saying they planned to press charges. He'll take the avert kind less annoying. Okay. That's fair. I'll take that. That's funny. It's not safe for staff or any of our youth right now have her there in the state of mind she's in. Letitia Salinas, Okay, this Times New Roman thing is really driving me nuts. Font. Forgive me. Font heads. Serif. Okay, they got a serif font. Let's go. Boom, better. Oh, thank God. Oh, much better. Neptune Bernie Sanders, by the way, he's been awfully quiet. Oh, right. No, that's exactly why. Right, that's exactly why. Part of it's also that Bernie Sanders, I haven't heard that before. Well, that's primarily why, right? Because he, like I said, he sold out to Biden and the administration for his position. I think, like, I don't know, Secretary of the military. No, was it not? The leader of the Committee on Defense or something, the Defense Committee or something like that. Now he's got some position that he finds important, and that was basically the bargaining chip, that the bargain that he made with the Biden administration to basically bow out and provide support for the Biden administration. He's he's a man of his word, even though he has what's the phrase? Broken his convictions to an extent. At least our impression of what he stands for, right? I mean, he's been quiet about all these things because we're going to hold him accountable for that. Some people are going to hold him accountable for it and say, hey, you said this and this and this, but that's not what you're doing. So, yeah, that's why. That's primarily why, because he doesn't want to be held accountable. Okay. CYFD later tried to place her in the same shelter, but still didn't have her medications. Reese told Gonzalez the shelter wouldn't accept her, not because we don't want to help her, but we can't help her. Again, these shelters need the funding. CYFD should have taken care of her meds, Reese said. She's a little kid. I mean, it's bad enough when it's a grown-up, but a little kid. Do your job. Yeah, it's frustrating, Gonzalez replied. All right, they don't have the funding. We don't have universal health care, which is what we need. We don't have housing as a human right. We don't have any of the things that we really need for our families and our children to have good living conditions. I mean, this country is a shithole. And actually, some parts of the country is actually third world. If you get like near the Appalachia Trail, stuff like that, don't have electricity, still using outhouses. I mean, it's as long as our people can get, as long as the corporations and the politicians own, and the corporations who own those politicians get away with destroying people's lives for fun and profit, they will. Because there's lots of money to be made in doing it. Johnson, the CYFD spokesperson, said caseworkers must hand a foster child's medication to a shelter employee. Why wouldn't a youth have meds? Well, the reason why the youth wouldn't have it is to make sure that they don't overdose on it or someone else won't steal it. Which, I get that. Which is, that is fair. Fair. However, maybe the prescription hasn't been filled, he said. Maybe the youth had meds at a foster home placement and didn't bring them. Maybe they've been on the run. Yeah, there may be a lot of reasons for it. The primary thing would be to make sure that they're never on the run in the first place, that poverty doesn't happen, the trauma doesn't happen, that they have a home and a family and a community that they can rely on. That's That is the only answer. Anything other than that is corporate profiteering. After taking photos of the damage, Gonzalez told Reese to let her know if she needed anything else. Hopes they won't see you guys for a long time, Reese replied. Santa Fe police would be called to the shelter 44 more times for incidents involving residents in the next 17 months. A survival response. Experts, shelter staff, and even police agreed cops aren't the best people to deal with these kids. Yeah, no shit. The mere presence of police can be triggering to a youth in crisis. Yep, sometimes kids fight back and get into more trouble. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why defund the police is so important. We get the right people go to these places to answer the call because police aren't qualified to do it. It's not, I know I'm going to keep saying this all throughout this. I apologize, but it's the truth. In September 2021, police and EMTs responded to a shelter in Hobbs after a foster teenager destroyed property and allegedly hit a staffer. She struggled and made suicidal statements as officers tried to restrain her, drawing their stun guns 3 times. Oh my god. In the process, the girl was forced onto a gurney so she could be taken for a psychiatric evaluation, screaming as she was loaded into an ambulance. Christ. Yikes. Next month near Albuquerque, after a teenager threatened shelter staff, an on-call CYFD employee unfamiliar with his case said the boy should go to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, according to police records and body camera video. When the kid tried to run, deputies handcuffed him and EMTs sedated him. CYFD changed course, telling emergency responders not to take the boy to the hospital. By then, he was already on a gurney. A police officer chased down a 17-year-old runaway in Taos. Taos, New Mexico is where the Earthships are. I want to go visit one someday. In Taos, at about the same time, the girl turned around and punched him in the face. It was at least her 6th runaway incident in the previous 3 months, according to dispatch logs. I'm sorry I attacked you, but I did not feel safe, she told the officer at the station. I've been getting hurt so many times, and that's why I'm running away, because I don't want to get hurt no more. And that's exactly it. Kids are going through so much trauma, not just in their daily lives, but inflicted because of the fucking police. Okay, so the police, I bet many of them really do want to help, and they just don't have the training to do it, and that is the fundamental problem. Children older than 14 have the right to refuse placements, and it's not a crime to run away, said Martin at CYFD. Okay, though when they do, police have to be called, in part because CYFD needs to determine the children aren't in danger. I'm worried about them when they're on the run, Martin said. I want them to be safe. Seems like the ones captured by body cameras are extremely predictable, said Georgia Davis, CYFD's former chief psychiatrist and a leader in efforts to change how the department deals with foster kids. Well, it sounds like you have a lot more work to do there, dude. These kids have extreme mood swings, Davis said, because of the trauma they've already been through. Putting them in a shelter rather than a foster home, okay, yep, where they can access appropriate mental health care is almost certainly going to cause an emergency. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the checks on foster parents aren't the best either. From what little I've read, there may be cases where kids are put into actual abusive foster homes as well, so that there needs to be more checking on that. So some people will take these children in because the government gives them, like thousands of dollars a month or something like that to take care of the kid, instead of giving that money to their actual families to get them out of poverty, to get them housing, to get them a job, get them food, and get them into rehab, get them health care, get them mental health care, right? Instead of putting this money towards keeping the family together and solving the source of that trauma, to give it to already well-off people. It's increasing. It's a way that a part of the systemic and structural racism inherent to the system, instead of helping families of color, are helping predominantly white people to be more rich, more well-off. Many of the videos viewed by Searchlight and ProPublica, police officers tried to defuse the situation, even attempting to counsel teenagers. Sometimes they sit with a child in crisis for an hour or more, talking to them as they wait for the child to be transferred to another shelter or sent for a psychiatric evaluation. November 2020, a teenage girl in foster care threatened to kill herself at the Dream Dream Tree Project shelter in Taos. A team of officers stayed with her on the front porch and tried for over an hour to talk her down. I've been here at Dream Tree for 2 months. I can't do this anymore, she cried to the officers. I just want the pain to end. Christ. You're 15 years old, you're a young lady, you have your whole future ahead of you. No, she doesn't. Officer Gilbert Martinez says, you don't want to give up. I have kids, they're already older, but if I ever heard my daughter say that was it, I would be devastated. Well, guess what? Their parents aren't around to hear that. Their life is already fucking destroyed because of trauma. I mean, what life does this poor child see when they don't have housing, they don't have healthcare, they don't have access to education, they don't have jack shit because the government has left them behind because they can profit from it. Roughly an hour later, 2 CYFD employees arrived. She needs to go to the hospital, one said to the other. Then they would try to find the girl a bed at another shelter. You gotta start calling and looking around. So this is a part of the problem too, that they have to call and look around. There should be a central dispatcher that keeps track of all of the shelters and all the housing and all the places available in the whole county. So, because it's not the police shouldn't have to do that. There should be specialists that deal with that sort of a thing 24 hours a day. And these places should get the money they need to take care of it. They should have psychiatrists on staff and so on and so forth. It's all about where the funding is being allocated to. Is it going to the police or is it going to people who actually can help deal with the problem? Obviously, it's not going to the police to the place where they can actually deal with the problem. Okay, there you go. Some uplifting news. That's what we do here. Questions, comments, suggestions on this? Vodka. Water. Okay. Another uplifting story for us to think about. This is from April 5th, a few days ago. I really am blue. It's crazy. I've got, like, I have one of those lights up there. Okay. Well, it'll make if it is vodka, it'll make the stream a lot more interesting very quickly, because I can't hold my alcohol like I used to. I've had two sandwiches this morning, and that's it. It was what was it? Turkey and cheese this morning. Yeah, so that much vodka. Oh God. Whee! Be a lot more fun. All right, private planes and luxury yachts aren't just toys for the ultra wealthy, they're also huge tax breaks. So now my policies, I don't necessarily deal with this in the 100% right way. When I talk about this, I think I added this last year, a luxury tax, so that people who are buying like huge luxuries like multi-million-dollar paintings or diamonds or jets have the taxes increase on these things. I mean, to 100% at the very least. I haven't quite put it to more than 100%, but eventually there would be a scale if I got really into it, that, you know, if you got a person or a business buying a private jet, that should be, you know, 100%, 200% just in taxes alone. That's the sort of things that we need to be doing to really tear down the rich and to just abscond with their wealth to reduce inequality. And so the thing here you also see is their huge tax breaks. Well, who writes the laws? Politicians. Who owns the politicians? Corporations and the rich, right? If you can't afford your own congressman, you're not rich enough. Unfortunately, the corporations and the rich can. You and I can't. So that's why we don't have any representation in the government at all. What's the only thing better than having... Okay, this color... I don't have this installed, do I? I don't. This color is driving me nuts. Hold on. Yeah, this is driving me nuts. Let's see if I can change this color. This. I'm not sure where to do it. Okay. So this is from the secret IRS files inside the tax records of the 0.001%. Flying to Ireland to inhale the seaside air as you drive a golf ball into the scenic distance. Crossing the country to reach your enormous yacht, which is ready for you for your Hudson River pleasure cruise. Hosting a governor's wife on your very own aircraft. These are only a few of the joys that the richest Americans have experienced in the recent years through their private jets. And what made them all the sweeter is that they came with a tax write-off. For the past 2 years, ProPublica has documented the many ways that the ultra-wealthy avoid taxes. The biggest or most daring maneuvers scale in the billions of dollars. And while the tax deductibility of private jets isn't the most important feature of U.S. tax law, the fact that billionaires' luxury rides come with millions in tax savings says a lot about how the system really works. Right, which is what I was saying. You right-click on the links. Click on the links and click inspect. Okay, so the links, that's not... Okay, yeah, for this, I'm looking for the text up here that was driving me nuts. We don't need to worry about this. This, I would like to darken up a little bit. I couldn't find the, like, I'm not familiar with this CSS here. Like the dash color neutral, that I'm not sure about. Newer stuff that I haven't dealt with, so I'm not exactly sure where to change this to solid black. Let me in! Change something. Oh, let's spell properly. That's a little bit better. Okay, that worked. Now it's actually black. All right, thanks. Yeah, and we've covered some of these articles that they've gone over, which have been great. Okay, so wow, the tax deductibility of private jets isn't the most important feature of U.S. tax law. The fact that billionaires' luxury rides come with millions tax savings says a lot about how the system really works. Exactly. There are dozens of examples, and this is also in serif-based font. Okay. Thank you. All right. Better. My counterpart at work, she likes Calibri. What's she like better? Calibri or Donna? Calibri has a little more space between it. Do dash space. That's a little better. That's a little better. Add a little bit of letter spacing and it reads a little better. Okay. There are dozens of examples of wealthy Americans taking these sorts of deductions, which are premised on the notion that the planes are used mainly for business in the massive trove of tax records that have formed the basis for ProPublica's Secret IRS Files series. The ultra-wealthy, however, can easily blur business and pleasure, and when they purport to make their planes available for leasing to fulfill one definition of using the planes for business, they tend to be more adept at generating tax deductions than revenue. Yeah, exactly. Tony Alvarez and Brian Marshall, close this down, built a successful consulting firm specializing in restructuring, advising struggling or bankrupt companies on what to sell and whom to lay off. It can be a grim business. Marsal has been known to announce to prone firms that they were now a community of pain, but the partners, who are also close friends, own other enterprises. The Hogshead Golf Club, built by friends for friends fun, on the southwest coast of Ireland. It boasts views of the nearby mountains and bay. 2016, before opening their new course, the pair teamed up via an LLC they named after their golf club to buy a 2001 Gulfstream Ford Jet. Next year, President Donald Trump signed his big tax cut into law. It made buying a plane even more attractive. The full price of the plane could be deducted in the first year. Oh my God. Perk called bonus depreciation. That is huge. Before, depreciation was typically only partially front-loaded, with the full balance spread over 5 years. Right, exactly. The law also, for the first time, made pre-owned planes eligible for this treatment. Yeah, of course, but Trump gave a shitload to rich people because he's one of them, and the entire point of the Trump administration is to make him and his family and his cronies rich. Not drain the swamp, but make sure the swamp is bigger and more fuller and a more bucolic swamp. As a result, when Alvarez and Marsal sprang for their second plane in 2018, this one is a Gulfstream 5, the entire cost was deductible. That year, the pair's two planes netted them a tax deduction of $14 million. Last August, their Gulfstream 5 took off from the Westchester County Airport in New York State for Ireland. About a half an hour later, their Gulfstream 4 left for the same destination, a small airport in County Kerry near their club. Both planes can comfortably seat over a dozen passengers, but flight records don't show who was on board. Over the coming month and a half, two planes crisscrossed the Atlantic several times. For these business trips, possibly yes. ProPublica's records do not indicate whether specific trips were taken as deductions. It just tested out if you download the Chrome extension font customers. Oh, you can set the font size, font family, and font color. Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Throw that in here. I don't generally change things. Oh, on stream I do. It's about one of the few places I actually do some changing. But yeah, throw that in here so we can take a look at it. That'd be interesting. Instead of having to hunt for it through developer tools. See, if so, operating expenses, including crew, fuel, and other costs from the partners' trips to oversee the course, would be fully deductible. These deductions would come in addition to depreciation. I need to feed the mob? Okay. Good luck. Hopefully you'll keep your hands. Enabled for stream. Oh, okay. Well, then that sounds like a good idea. Let's take a look. Ew. Verdana doesn't have Verdana. How does it not have Verdana? How does this not have Verdana? Seriously? How does this not have Verdana? I'm confused. Come on! Quick, damn you! Here. Okay, so does this... Doesn't have Verdun, doesn't have Calibri. Let's try this. Alright, let's see, let's check this out. See how that works. Wide. Okay, all right. Okay, these deductions, if they were for business, these deductions would come in addition to depreciation. Michael Kosnitsky, co-chair of the Private Client and Family Office Group at the law firm Pillsbury Winthrop, said his wealthy clients often own a business, such as an art gallery, in the same area where they own a vacation home. If the main purpose of a flight there is to attend that business, jet owners must take care to make that as clear as possible. I advise my clients to go to their secondary business location first upon landing, he said, as a way to help build the case. Yeah, this is exactly right. My wife doesn't like it, but I'm quite anal about how we do our business stuff, and it drives her nuts. But I don't want the IRS crawling up my butt about things. I try and keep things as clean as possible, and to make sure that the veil between personal and business isn't pierced at all. Makes life easier. Accounting for how a jet is used can get complicated if non-business guests such as family ride along on a business flight is treated as a fringe benefit, which is taxable. The benefit is typically attributed to the jet owner, experts say, but that wrinkle isn't too bad. The IRS formula used to calculate the benefit drastically undervalues the cost of riding on a private jet and is closer to the price of a first-class commercial ticket. Okay, well that's I can see that. Last Christmas, flight records showed that the two Gulf Streams again leaving together, this time to St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the Caribbean. While Alvarez and Marsal's consulting firm boasts an office in the islands, there isn't one on these particular islands, which are about 1,400 miles from the Caymans, making it appear this was a family trip. Operating costs from entertainment flights like these are non-deductible under tax law, but indulging in some pleasures doesn't necessarily imperil the key tax prize of bonus depreciation. As long as over the course of a year the jet is used over 50% of the time for business, the owner gets to keep that perk. Spokesperson for Alvarez and Marsal's firm did not respond to a request for comment. Maury Hassini made his fortune as a Florida home builder and has owned a plane since at least 2006. When Trump's tax bill began to gain momentum in Congress in the fall of 2017, he decided it was time for a new jet. Of course he did. The $19.5 million he paid for his 9-seat Bombardier Challenger 350 appeared as a deduction on his 2017 taxes, leading to almost $8 million in tax savings right off the bat. But there were more deductions to come. Even the interest on the loan he'd taken out by the plane was deductible, and his 2018 taxes show a $600,000 expense. So Hassini, a longtime Republican donor and close advisor to Florida, Jesus Christ, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was helping the governor and his family travel in style. In 2019, DeSantis' wife, Casey, flew on the jet from Tallahassee to Jacksonville to attend a fundraiser held by a defense contractor. It was just one of several times that the DeSantises or the campaign have used the jet over the past few years, according to campaign finance records. Such flights are generally allowed under Florida law as long as they are disclosed as in-kind contributions. Okay, yep, that makes sense. Hassini did not respond to questions from ProPublica. That's kind of nice. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 people. Okay. On his taxes, Hassini says the LLC that holds his plane is in the business of aircraft leasing. It's a very common move among jet owners. It makes sense. When they're not using the plane, they rent out the plane for chartered flights, usually via an independent leasing company. Not only does this defray the cost of ownership, but it has tax benefits too. It helps them establish that they bought the aircraft for a business purpose, the purpose of chartering. In theory, taxpayers aren't allowed to deduct losses from something that has no hope of being a profitable business. Yep. In practice, though, some billionaire-owned operations that look like expensive hobbies, such as racing horses and the Kentucky Derby, rack up business deductions by the tens of millions of dollars. Okay, yep. Republica examined the tax records of over 30 wealthy Americans who owned planes, and one thing was very clear. Profits in the airplane chartering business for this set, judging from their taxes, were extremely rare. Hassini's records show 2 years of profit over an 11-year period. Wow. Or take George Agairos, a California billionaire real estate developer who once owned the Seattle Mariners. Major GOP donor, he was also the U.S. ambassador to Spain from 2001 to 2004. Agairos, 86, has leased out his aircraft through his own chartering company for decades. From 2002 through 2019, his tax records show his company pulled a profit just twice. Overall, he deducted over $50 million in net losses over 3 years. Yeah, I don't see any poor people, any people struggling being able to pull tax deductions for, being homeless or anything like that. Good to be rich in all the ways. In June 2021, Agairos' Gulfstream landed at the small airport near Newburgh in New York's Hudson Valley, having flown cross-country from California. Nearby his 83,248-foot yacht, the Huntress, awaited. Over the coming weeks, the ship would be seen cruising up and down the Hudson River, astounding locals who gawked at its 6 decks, helipad, and hot tub. There it is. Representative for Agairos declined to comment. Yachts are dealt with differently from airplanes in tax law. They are considered entertainment facilities, so you can't claim deductions on the premise that you used it for business travel. Okay. That doesn't mean there's no tax savings to be had. Mike Fernandez is a capable businessman, having made a fortune starting and investing in healthcare companies. But the Florida-based investor seems to have abysmal luck with one of his businesses, leasing out his 180-foot yacht, the Lady Michelle, when he's not using it. On his 2017 and 2018 tax returns, he claimed a total of $11.3 million in expenses connected with the Lady Michelle from depreciation, repairs, wages, and other costs. Meanwhile, his revenue over 2 years totaled $178,000. Wow. So Fernandez did not respond to questions from ProPublica. So $178,000 of income and $11.3 million in expenses. How does that add up? They must have had a massive amount of money thrown into here to be able to do that. Okay. Should the IRS audit one of these businesses? Itself unlikely over the past decade due to the gutting of the agency's budget. The IRS faces a high hurdle, proving that not only was the business not profitable, but that the business owner was not really trying to profit. The case of personal jets adds an additional difficulty for an auditor. The ultra-wealthy can often argue even if chartering did not result in profits, they also use the plane to help conduct their main business. Yep. Robert Bigelow made his fortune in real estate and owns Budget Suites of America, an extended stay apartment chain. Passions, however, reach the skies and beyond. For decades, he's poured resources into investigating UFO sightings, oh my god, and paranormal phenomena. Oh my fucking god, what a waste of money. 2 years ago, he announced a $1 million in grants from his Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies for research into contact and communication with post-mortem or discarnate consciousness. And what I tell my wife is, if any of this stuff was actually true and actually ended up being something we could test empirically, it would radically change the face of humanity. Aliens existed, if afterlife actually existed, if vampires and unicorns and angels and demons existed, everything would radically change in society. It would be an exciting time, although in many cases also very scary. But it would be an exciting time because everything would change. The very foundations of our understanding how the world operated would change, and it would be a whole new era of research and advancements and all that sort of stuff. But it's never come to pass because it doesn't exist. Sorry. Bigelow Aerospace, a company focused on building expandable space habitats. I think I've heard of them. The company has had some success winning a contract from NASA for a module for use on the International Space Station. What it has not had is profits. Bigelow put more than $350 million into the company. My own real black hole, as he put it. In the 2 decades prior to 2018, even as Forbes and the Wall Street Journal variously estimate his net worth at $700 million and $900 million, Bigelow posted negative incomes on his taxes most years. As large losses from his aerospace company wiped out his other income, his personal jet held by Cosmos Air LLC also played a role. From 2005 to 2018, he deducted a total of $51 million related to the use of the plane. Yeah, we just read last week or the week before that Virgin Space is doing Virgin Galactic, Branson space thing, or his orbiting, his Virgin Orbit, which I think deals with satellites, is doing massive cuts. ProPublica could not find evidence that Bigelow charters his aircraft, nor did Bigelow respond to ProPublica's request for comment. Of course, the deductions could also be justified on the basis that the aircraft is necessary to tend to Bigelow's various businesses. The plane is a luxury expense, in other words, essential to help him run millions more in tax deductions, one black hole orbiting another. Okay, there you go. Some good news about the rich doing rich things. All right, questions, comments, suggestions on it? Okay. More vodka. Gotta drench my my sorrow in vodka. All right, The Dangers of Long Trains by Dan Schwartz and Topher Sanders, with additional reporting by Gabriel Sandoval and Danelle Morton. Trains are getting longer, railroads are getting richer, but these monster trains are jumping off tracks across America, and regulators are doing little to curb risk. Probably look for the rest. Okay, all right. Let's see. Just before 5 a.m., Harry Schaefer's wife called to him from across the living room, where he'd fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from installing the above-ground pool. Did he hear that sound, that metallic screeching from up the valley? She opened the door of their double-wide trailer and walked outside as Schaefer closed his eyes. A moment later came a thunderous crack of splintering lumber. Debris shot through the living room. Schaefer opened his eyes again to find a hulking train car steps away from where he lay. It had shorn off the roof, exposed the murk of the pre-dawn sky. He jumped up and ran outside and saw the garage next door in flames. Though it sat at the floor... Okay, this... I've got to change this one too. I'm sorry, this is just really driving me nuts here. Okay, let's go here. Though it sat at the floor of a valley along a busy stretch of railroad tracks, the quiet town of Hindman, Pennsylvania hadn't seen a major derailment in recent memory. Trains didn't frighten residents like Schaefer, even though 21 of them had trundled through the town's center day and night. We have a train going through our small town as well. We haven't had any issues as far as I'm aware. I don't typically hear it because I'm far enough away that I don't have to hear it, fortunately. But unbeknownst to them, the corporations that ran those trains had recently adopted a money-making strategy to move cargo faster than ever with fewer workers on trains that are consistently longer than at any time in history, driven by the efficiency goals of precision scheduled railroading. Companies are foregoing long-held safety precautions such as assembling trains to distribute weight and risk, or taking the proper time to inspect them. Curly Bear, yay! How you doing? Welcome. We're right now we're reading something on train derailment. We just started. Did something on Clarence Thomas. Did something on foster children in the foster system. On jets being a nice tax write-off. Something on Clarence Thomas. And the Patriot Act, or the TikTok Act, what is it called? The Restrict Act. Now we're on this. It's basically a whole ProPublica day. A whole bunch of ProPublica stuff popped in my stream, primarily on Twitter, that I've saved, and a lot of good stuff. Sorry I missed so much of the stream. I swamped with work. Oh, it's all good. Glad to see you. Yeah, my work has been super busy too. It's been kind of overwhelming, but so I get you. Oh my god, I'm so overwhelmed. It'll be when I get back to Monday. It's going to be a lot of work. I've got stuff I'm behind on, and some people have to fill out forms and send it to me, and then I have to process it. They're not giving me the information I need. I mean, consistently not giving me, like, I'm asking them for who is your vice president, and what's their name, and what is their title, and then also for what college are you sending this form for, and they just won't fill it out. Just won't put that in there. I mean, oh my god, and it slows me down. It sends me into an emotional spiral of frustration and anger and anxiety, because now I have to talk to these people and say, hey, please, dear God, fill out the fucking form correctly. I'm not asking for anything that's difficult even. Just fill it out. But, it's a new process too, to be fair. We've just started putting it together in the last 5 or 6 months, so people are just getting used to it. But still, I'm asking for it. Just put it on the page. Clarence Thomas has always been doing shady stuff. He's a right-winger and an originalist, so he's pretty bad. Pretty horrible human being. Oh, so for accessibility, we have an exceptions process, so that if the university is going to be using software that is facing to the students, student facing, and it has accessibility issues, that they have to fill out a form saying, hey, we're for our students or our courses, whatever, that we're using this and it has accessibility issues, and we need an exception for this. Yes, because it would violate the policy, the accessibility policy. So they need to get a signed exception through their VP so that they can still use that. It's for that, so that they can use an inaccessible product. And what you'll find is that there is no product that is accessible, like 100% accessible. There's nothing out there. There's no website. There's no software that is 100% accessible, because businesses don't give a flying fuck about it, because it's the developers. The developers aren't trained in accessibility, and that's my blog post on this bitched about that, right? We need to fix our developers, our website developers, our computer programmers, all that, and all these people who are creating software or creating the websites and stuff like that, so that they see and understand things through the lens of accessibility, so that they create everything that is in a way that is accessible. But that's not what we have. Accessibility is many times not ever talked about, or it's just a small unit on one thing. You just something you have to worry about. It's the law. Here's some links, and that's it. The web development and so on isn't taught through the lens of accessibility. So pretty much everything that is ever going to be used, it is. That's exactly what it is. It is an afterthought because, again, the developers don't know accessibility. It's just something that, someone like me comes in and say, hey, your shit's fucked up. Please know how to do your fucking job. Right? That's who we are because, they weren't taught. They didn't learn about accessibility. And for many businesses, it's just an extra cost. It's not, you could be potentially losing out on 20% of profit because at any given time, 15 to 20% of the population has accessibility issues, right? And they could be missing out on that. And there's trillions of dollars that are potentially at stake for websites which are accessible. If they're accessible, they've got more people who can take advantage of their product and buy it and service or whatever. And if not accessible, they don't have access to it. And people with disabilities that they know others who have a similar disability. Yeah, they can write off. Yeah, they can write off the costs of. Well, it is a tax write-off, but it also reduces how much potential profit there is because they have to spend the time to hire someone or to train them how to do it properly because they don't already know how to do it. Exactly right. They don't care to make it available. Right. That's exactly right. They don't care. They don't know. It's an annoyance and it'll cost them money and they don't. That's all that matters. Bottom line is it's about profit. So if profit, then they're not going to worry about accessibility. They're not going to worry about it until they finally get sued or they get afraid enough by the number of lawsuits that have been coming through because the number of lawsuits coming through for accessibility issues has been steadily ramping up. Over just recently, it's been going up very quickly. So yeah, it's the failure of our education system. It's a failure of society in general, the ableist society and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so nothing we use is accessible, and we have to find if we are using things that are inaccessible, we have to have accommodations available to make sure that our students access it in an equitable a way as possible. Every university has to deal with this, some more than others, but it's just a struggle of doing a business in an ableist society. So yeah, it's a thing. Glad to be doing it, but it's a discipline that is filled with rage every day because of the lack of knowledge of accessibility or the care for it and the lack of support, broadly speaking. Like when we talk to some, I don't do it the actual talking to businesses. Like our vendor office or whatever talks to the vendors who deal with like ebooks and stuff like that, and they're like, hey, we have accessibility on our timeline and it's stuff that we're looking at, but it basically never gets done, or the ebook publishers don't know or don't care about it either, and they just don't respond. They say, oh sure, we'll look at it, and they never do. So it's yeah, if it hurts their profit, they're not going to care. More rage. Okay. Instead, their rushed workers are stringing together trains that stretch for 2 or even 3 miles, sometimes without regard for the delicate physics of keeping heavy, often combustible tanker cars from jumping off the tracks. Rail safety grabbed headlines this February after a Norfolk Southern train passed sensors designed to flag mechanical issues and catastrophically derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. Republicans and Democrats alike are now calling for tighter regulation on company operations, especially in light of precision-scheduled railroading. ProPublica's reporting suggests they should start by looking at federal regulators' ponderous response to the mounting warnings about the dangers of long freight trains. By that morning in Hinman in August 2017, regulators had already investigated 7 long train accidents, which the length was the culprit, and the nation's largest rail worker union had sounded alarms about a pattern of problems. None of this caused the Federal Railroad Administration, the agency in charge of train safety, to intercede, even as more long trains crashed in the years after the Hindman derailment, sending cars spilling into other communities. One moment, I'm gonna I'm gonna sit down. I have to get to my thingy. Okay. Okay. Camera, and I'll be okay. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, today the rail administration says it lacks enough evidence that long trains pose particular risk. ProPublica discovered it is a quandary of the agency's own making. It doesn't require companies to provide certain basic information after accidents, notably the length of the train, that would allow it to assess once and for all the extent. It's one of our biggest frustrations, without question, said Jared Cassidy, the alternate national legislative director for the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. Court. The union representative said the agency can track train length for accidents, and they've chosen not to. Yeah, and it would be that the more information you have on accidents, the better. Because if you have more data, it's easier to find more trends. In the absence of data, the industry insists that long trains have actually helped to improve rail safety, pointing to an overall decline in derailments. The Association of American Railroads, the industry lobby, says safety is a priority when building long trains, and notes that regulators have never cited length as the direct cause of an accident. The nation's 7 largest rail companies, so-called Class 1s, echo these points, defending their safety practices and saying that ESR has led to problems. To make sense of this gap in information, ProPublica reviewed court and regulatory records of thousands of incidents involving trains of all lengths, as well as technical investigative notes in federal files from nearly decades of long train incidents. We conducted more than 200 interviews, including candid conversations with rail personnel, described how companies have sidestepped basic practices when building and running long trains. Then we went to Hindman to learn what happened to the community in the aftermath of the preventable catastrophe, covering damage that cannot be repaired, even with millions in rail company checks. Okay, so this is Hindman. This is, I think, 2017, I think. There's a 7 in there somewhere. That summer morning, the sky was burning red when Schaefer, a thin, stoic man of 50, surveyed his neighborhood. Mounds of what looked like grain had spilled from the train cars, and molten sulfur, like lava, crawled across the grass. He spotted his wife standing on the neighbor's porch, but before he could process the relief, saw another neighbor, Christina Duffin, screaming from his second-story window. "Help me," she yelled. "I can't get out." Duffin, 27, had thought it was an earthquake when her house started shaking and she rolled on top of her 2-year-old daughter, Mia, to protect her. When it stopped, she hit the lights and found drywall dust everywhere. Her house, too, had been struck by a train car, knocking a wall panel studded nails over the stairs, trapping her and her daughter as the fire outside grew. Wonderful. Schaefer ran for a ladder, but the train car had demolished one side of his home, including the bedroom where, on any other night, he and his wife would have been sleeping, where his German Shepherd Diamond had her kennel. Couldn't see Diamond, and he wouldn't learn until a few days later that she had been crushed to death. By the time he got to Sutphin, her brother had run across the street and a neighbor had arrived with a ladder. Brother climbed up and carried Mia down, and Sutphin followed behind. Volunteer firefighters, fear on their faces, raced door to door, urging people to evacuate. For longtime residents, it felt like another dark chapter. In 1949, a Christmas tree fire burned through dozens of businesses and homes. A flood in 1984 lapped at door frames and swamped basements, and in 1996, another flood submerged windowsills in brown swirling water. Sounds like it's not a good place to live. But this disaster, thought Bobby Walls, Hinman's 36-year-old emergency manager, was something else. He'd grown up in Hinman, starting a family in the green, peaceful valley. Now a flaming geyser towered over rooftops, and Walls wondered, was anyone dead? As he ran toward the blaze in his firefighting gear, Walls didn't know that the tanker car at its center contained propane, enough that if it erupted and set off the six others around it, the explosion could engulf the entire town and some 900. Oh my god. Stupid, it burns. It burns. Tanker car still howled about 7 hours later as Walls and a number of first responders waited in a cinder block walled classroom for word from a train company crew that was monitoring the fire. Then the door flung open, the room quieted as a CSX worker hustled to the whiteboard and began to write. The tanker car is rapidly failing, an explosion is imminent, we need to evacuate now. Yikes. That's from the Hinman derailment. Wish would have given the year again. For generations, railroad workers considered a 1.4 mile long train huge. Then Hunter Harrison came along. Harrison was a railroading innovator with only a high school education, hired as a car oiler in a Memphis yard in 1963. By the 1980s, he had moved into top management of Illinois Central, a carrier he viewed as bloated and fatally unprofitable. I already blocked him. He's gone. Yeah, I had another person pop in earlier, was a bit antagonistic too. Fortunately, he left. You didn't have to worry about it, so we're good. It's just one of those weekends. The people are coming out today. I don't know why. Full moon or something. I don't know. All right. It was an era when most railroads, including his, had an operating ratio in the 90s. The company had to spend about 90 cents to make $1 and was netting less than a dime, or 10% in profit. Okay, sure. Harrison, a self-described stern disciplinarian taskmaster, was obsessed with efficiency. At a time when other executives feared computers, he used them to track every boxcar and locomotive and learned which ones sat idle. Railroads, he once said, according to his biography, Railroader, only make money when cars are moving. Okay, true. So why would we lay down tracks just to have cars sit idle? Okay, that's fair. Here's good. When he became CEO in 1993, Harrison looked for even the smallest way to cut costs, from tearing up unused tracks to eliminating document storage and overnight stays for train crews. By 1998, he had managed to drop operating ratio 62.3, significant jump in profitability. So he shifted from like 90% in cost down to 6% in cost. So that's a 20-something% in increase in profit. But the savings were never enough. He flew around in a corporate jet with a tail number that read OR59, his aspirational operating ratio. Been in love yet? Always. It's just one of these weekends. I don't know. It's all good. It has to happen every like 3 or 4 months. Otherwise, I don't feel like I'm doing the right thing. If I'm not pissing people off, then not doing my job. In the years that followed, Harrison made his mark as a senior leader at Canadian National after it acquired Illinois Central. He sold off 35% of its locomotive fleet and focused on moving cars in and out of yards at breakneck speeds. To do this, the employees had to work harder, and so did the trains. I'm impatient, he once told Progressive Railroading, also demanding that I'm asking people to stretch. By then, he was CEO. Longer trains would become integral to the management philosophy he dubbed precision scheduled railroading. The rail industry makes its money by the weight and distance of the freight it hauls. Okay, that makes sense. A long haul train makes in one trip what a short train would make in 2, 3, or 4, and with fewer employees. Okay, that makes sense. There's no need to design a new breed of super trains. These behemoths could be built from more of the same components. More cars with engines spliced in midsections to help move, stop, and more weight. South by, how you doing? Welcome. We're reading an article here on train safety from ProPublica. You've covered several articles from ProPublica today. They're just a whole bunch that fell into my Twitter stream over this last week or so. Covered Clarence Thomas, the Restrict Act, foster children, and something else. But we're on train safety now. How you doing today? I'm apparently parched today. Drinking a lot of water. There's a link there that describes it. Lesbian, gay. I'd have to look it up too. Bisexual, demisexual, trans, queer, asexual, polyamorous. There's a link there that describes what all of those are. Yeah, LGBT plus safe space. We support that here. One of the guys who had been a regular on here found the link to that. It was pretty cool. So I integrated it into my stream. Worked well. So it's a bunch of made up BS that you really mean to say is you support poor mental health. No, poor mental health is people like you thinking it's poor mental health. The issue here is conservatives are sociopaths. You are the ones that create the mental health problem for the LGBT. I might have to end up doing that. I try and give them a chance. We'll redo it. Okay. So conservatives are I have a blog post I'm working on that talks about entropy and entropy within human social systems. And if you look at conservatism, it is an entropic ideology because it's inherently tribalistic and destructive. Now, so conservatives are, as an entropic ideology, is the primary driver for the mental health problems globally because it goes for tribalism, it goes for inequality, bigotry, like you're showing here, and so on and so forth. So if you would stop being a horrible human being and thinking the LGBT whatever community have mental disorders, you would help stop being the problem. So yeah, there's that. You need to rethink your life choices if that's where you're at. In 2013, Harris was CEO of Canadian Pacific when he wrote in its annual report, "We're driving longer and longer trains, which means fewer train starts, faster network velocity, and better service at lower cost." Obviously, with faster trains, longer trains, there's definitely a chance for more problems. My daughter doesn't understand I'm streaming. Okay, one second. Oh, gods. Okay. America's largest railroads took note. They began making their trains longer and their staffing margins smaller. In 2015, companies started laying off what would become a fifth of the workforce at the largest railroads. See, this is kind of what you're seeing here is just that drive. I don't have to think about anything, my dude. I'm not a grown man in a yellow shirt pretending that a group of people that make up. It's not 0.004% of society really matter. Oh my fucking god, dude. The level of ignorance and inhumanity that a person like that has to show is pretty horrific. Yeah. There's only so much you can do for people like that, and the sad part is, for many conservatives, if they don't encounter it themselves. Okay, so let's get into this larger question. I know I've talked about this before. So all human problems can be classified by a separation on 4 levels. Individual separation from the self. It makes no sense to talk to people like that. They won't listen. Yeah, right. And I gave him a chance. He was being a little bit reasonable there for a little bit, but then he starts going off the thing. So yeah, it's about time. About time. An individual separation from the self, an individual separation from the rest of humanity, separation from the natural world, and an individual separation from what I'm calling the cosmic. I don't like that phrase, but that's what I'm. So for conservatives in general, they have a separation on generally all those levels, because the core driver for conservatism is ignorance, and part of that ignorance is fear, or a part of that separation comes from privilege and tribalism. Who the fuck cares what shirt you have on? That's so stupid. Yeah. Oh, it is. It 100% is. It's just these right wingers. They can't come to us with an actual moral high ground because they don't have it, because they're bigots and they're horrible human beings. So they have to go in and say, oh, Yoda shirt and all that sort of stuff. It's pretty, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. But it is what it is, what they are, and it's sad state that is what we have to deal with. So for conservatives, they have a separation on all these levels. And a lot of times for conservatives, and we see this in politicians too, that their child comes out as gay or trans or something like that, and then all of a sudden they change like that because they now have that experience, they now have that connection to whatever this minority group is, and then they change. So these right-wingers are as such because they lack that connection to humanity. Either their connection to humanity has been damaged or never forged. And how we fundamentally prevent that as a society is to ensure that this is in my I redesigned, refactored my entire educational policies around this very concept. Hard over who? So that my educational policies really shifted to make sure that our children don't end up conservative, by ensuring that they have the connections to themselves, the connections to the rest of humanity, the connections to the natural world, and the connections on all 4 levels, so that they have a very powerful connection to their interdependence with everything around them, but also to increase their empathy and understanding, maximizing their education and knowledge. Yeah. It's that weekend, right? You gotta have a bunch of right-wingers pop in and show their ignorance, then block them. It's been a while. It's been several months. Though I haven't been streaming I'm only streaming once a week now, so it's been, usually it would happen every 2 or 3 months. And I just been streaming for a week or for a month or 2. So yeah, it was definitely time. Definitely time. So yeah, the entire education was changed to make sure that our children, maximize their connection to everything, so that we don't have people like that thinking that LGBT plus people are brain damaged and problematic, because that's not the case. So yeah, there we go. And at some point I'll have a blog post out on that. I haven't. That post is my humanities terminal disease, the separation. I'm ending up cannibalizing that into different areas. I'm not sure where I'm eventually going to actually put that out officially blog post, but we'll see eventually. I'll talk about it enough here. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask. But yeah, okay. So here, right, we're looking at cutting costs, laying off people, increasing safety problems, to increasing speeds, increasing the number of cars, and laying off people in order to increase profits. And that, of course, ends up with a lot of problems, as we're seeing here, with trains derailing, train problems, and all sorts of things like that. Because it's like just-in-time production and just-in-time shipping, stuff like that. There's advantages to that, but it has to be done safely. And with trains, it's very difficult to do that because of all of that. It's metal, giant ass trucks, giant ass trains, all metal, right? And especially if they're not spending the money on the infrastructure, which is another place that they're going to not spend the money on to maintain, because it hurts their profits, accidents are more likely to happen. If you've got fewer people to monitor, right? Faster trains, longer trains, and trains going in and out fast as you possibly can, something's going to break. One thing to do with automation, computers, where you have that level of control over things, and you don't have that tons and tons of metal behind it. But with trains, it's a little different. Yeah, you got to be much more careful. If they're going to operate at these speeds, they need to spend the money to make sure they can do it safe by having the staffing, having the infrastructure updated, and they have advanced safety protocols in order to make such things safer. They should be spending more money on people, more money on safety protocols to make sure that they can do these long trains safely. But that's not what capitalism does, right? It's making as much money as you can, no matter the cost. My tension within methods of change posts, talk about all the time, goes into the basics of that. Okay. All right. In 2015, companies started laying off what would become a fifth of the workforce at the largest railroads. That year, CSX bragged to its investors that its train length initiative, how longer trains helped to reduce staff needs. Harrison left Canadian Pacific to run CSX in 2017. That year, the company reported $249 million in savings. CSX told ProPublica that it impugns the assertion that its management philosophy promotes dangerous practices. Harrison died 9 months after taking over CSX, but he'd already secured his legacy. Many of the biggest railroad companies operating in the U.S. had adopted precision scheduling railroading. They were running long trains. The Association of American Railroads told ProPublica the industry has been safely running long trains for more than 8 years. It says they are more fuel efficient and allow companies to run trains, which fewer chances of collisions at railroad crossings. Sure, yeah, and I can get this. I can get the savings here. It just has to be done safely. You get joining the U.S. military? Hey, yeah, good question. And I had someone pop on last week trying to attack me with that. But he did end up following me, fortunately. I'll say yes and no, I guess. I joined, at the time, I didn't know about politics or religion, for that fact. I didn't give a care. And I didn't know about it. And I was in a position of privilege. And as I've gotten into politics, I've become much more acutely aware of my privilege. And to be ignorant of politics is to basically announce your privilege. Because only people who are privileged have the luxury of not caring about politics. So for me, going to the Navy was just about going to college. That's the only reason why I joined. It's the only way I could get into Navy. But looking back upon my time and what I was a part of, as far as I remember, I was a part of the initial bombing of Iraq. I was on the USS Enterprise, 95, 96, somewhere around there, where we were on our initial Mediterranean run to the Mediterranean. And as far as I'm aware, we were responsible for the bombing of Iraq or something like that. It's like the time when Saddam said, if you cross this line of demarcation, we'll fire on you with your planes, we'll fire on your planes. We did, he did, and then we went at 100% reactor power for 3 days there, and then bombing. So yeah, that is something that I have to live with, and it bothers me. I don't like, especially when I got to the point where I've learned about U.S. imperialism, and I say on here that the United States is the largest terrorist organization in the world. It sucks knowing that I was a part of that. And it just points more towards how broken things are and how much privilege I had at the time to not understand the politics. So that's why I'm out here, talking with you guys to help spread the word. That's why I have my policies, that's why I have my blog posts, that's why I'm out here trying to help make sure others understand politics and understand their privilege, and stuff like that, so that we can prevent this. Like the world climate. So what I say is climate change. The only way to save humanity from extinction in the next 200 to 300 years is if the United States is no longer the largest terrorist organization in the world. And I talk about that in my post on how might a resource-based economy come into being. The first step is the United States has to stop becoming the largest terrorist organization in the world. That is the thing that is required for any progress by the human race. The United States no longer being the largest terrorist organization in the world. Nothing can happen positive with us as a globalized civilization until that is fixed. So yeah, I do regret it. It's part of the, and I talk about this in my policies, that one of the primary methods of recruiting for the military is not having universal education, people not having access to college as a human right. So there's some articles about that. There's some articles on my policy talking about that. Good to see that you know of difference. Yeah, it is. It sucks, but it also, having gone through it, makes me see things differently, much more vehement about the harms of the military. And also, we need to make sure, and I have this in my educational policies too, that we need to make sure that we don't have the military coming to recruit at the schools. That has to not be a thing, and we honestly need to think about U.S. imperialism as a core part of history. Even I haven't quite gotten to this point that we need to teach U.S. history from the standpoint, in the context and through the lens of slavery. I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but I do talk about in my educational policies that we do talk about the horrors of U.S. history, like Howard Zinn's books, People's History, United States, and stuff like that are amazing. And they get into the horrors of U.S. history, and that's the sort of things we teach our children so that they know what this country is founded on and how to make sure that the future that they are going to be part of doesn't reflect that anymore. That they can not do that. Like I say, if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. Then, of course, that is not what a lot of our children are taught. Some of our education is very much about imperialism, propaganda. I say that every Congress and every president of the United States should be tried for crimes against humanity and crimes against war crimes and crimes against the natural world. Like the ICC, right? The International Criminal Court, they have a warrant out for Putin. It's like, well, do they have a warrant out for Obama? Bombed more people, bombed more countries, and murdered more people than even Bush did, and especially civilians. And if they don't have something out for him or Bush and Blair, who started the Iraq War, on unknowingly false pretenses, right? I mean, it's a sham. It's a fucking fraud. It'll be very hard for me to take the ICC ever seriously unless that's the sort of truth they're dropping. If they're not doing that, then they're just like NATO. They're just a front for U.S. imperialism. So, so yeah, some bright shiny things for you. Sure, I'll put out my policies here so you can take a look at it. That board, U.S. Machine for War and Terrorism. No, I didn't. Ugh. Here's my policies on imperialism. If you want to take a look. I don't think I talk about my military time, actually. I don't think I do. But there you go. Does that answer your question? Do you have any other questions about that? Like, people tweeting that President Obama was not convicted. Oh, I know. Yes, that's a problem. If the person making drone strikes in hospitals. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Gaming man. I see that too, and I'm like, fucking Jesus Christ, dude. Seriously, why would you say that? Yeah. It just shows how well the propaganda machine of the Democratic Party and the United States in general is. How good it is. If you follow mainstream media, yeah, you're not really gonna know what's going on. It's not until you have that awakening that, the government in whole, both parties, is the problem, until you really are able to start looking at things more objectively. And it's a difficult thing to do because, like you say, right? People who are struggling and just trying to get by and live don't have time to educate themselves. That's the whole point of the way things are set up here in the United States. People who are struggling, don't have health care, worried about, living paycheck to paycheck, don't have time to educate themselves, don't have time to, figure out the problems or to participate in, burning, like what's happening in France, right? They're burning everything because Macron wanted to raise the retirement age by 2 years. You wouldn't see that happen here in the United States ever. I mean, that's how brainwashed we are as a country. That's how effective the propaganda arm is. The media, the corporate media is, because corporate media serves corporations, because they are a corporation. They're owned by rich people. They're owned by corporations. So all that stuff works together with the four deadly industries to make sure that the people are brainwashed and support whatever it is they want them to support. War in Ukraine, Iraq, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, Obama was bad. I went crazy on someone on Facebook or on Twitter who I thought was saying that Obama was good. He didn't have any problems or something like that. And I just went, but then he was like, "Oh no, I was talking about Gaddafi, I think, Libya." I was like, "Oh fuck, dude, sorry." I deleted everything. I got triggered a little bit. That was pretty. Yeah. I don't get triggered that often and reply like that, but it does happen on occasion. All right. Okay. Any other questions? We only have a few minutes left, 5 minutes left. I don't know how much more we have of this article, but we can keep reading. There aren't any other questions. Yeah, normally I'm wearing a hoodie, so you don't see my shirt. It's actually kind of warm in here. Oh, it's 80 in here. I gotta work on my so there's a gaming mind. So I'll let you know this, that I saw my therapist on Friday, my every other week therapist, and she can diagnose me. Yeah, I know. Well, the heat will be turned off then, and the AC unit here that I have in here is really good. I've been very happy with it. It's just I have a separate thermometer, separate thermostat that controls the vent from the furnace, and I don't have that set properly yet. I have to get that set properly so the flapper closes so I don't roast myself up here. Yeah, I didn't realize how warm it is. It's 80 up here. No wonder I'm sweating. Yeah, I do. I couldn't. I'd have to, because computers don't like don't like hot things. That was the most important thing of this whole process, having air conditioning, because I absolutely hate being warm and sweaty, and computers sure as hell don't like it either. So yeah, it was fine. Because we got this done last summer, office, and fine except for those days that were super hot. Uh, but other than that, the AC here works just fine. I've been very happy with it. Very happy with it. All right, we just have 3 minutes left. I guess we'll stop here for that. So next, I was thinking about going over Marianne Williams's policies today, but I might do that next week. I started looking at it, and we'll probably go. I think we might go over that next week. Found her interesting during 2016. I don't think she ran in 2020, did she? I don't know if she did, but she's running as a Democrat, I think, 2024 for president. It'll be interesting to go over her policies and see what she says. Some of it's pretty decent. Some of it also is intentionally vague, so she doesn't have to account for some things or something like that. So she's going to run just to make Biden accountable, not to really. And she can't hold Biden accountable. Nobody. I mean, see that this is the issue, right? With people running who actually want to make sense, especially within the Democratic Party. There's nothing. I mean, she can run to bring issues to the front, like Bernie Sanders did, right? Which I don't have a problem with that. Running just to bring awareness to issues is a good thing. Bernie Sanders was very powerful in doing that. He booted the Overton window so far to the left, it was just amazing. I mean, like, our entire political discourse has changed because of him running. And actually, Andrew Yang is also one of those too. Although he was kind of a one issue wonder. He brought UBI to the forefront and really, again, helped to participate in booting that Overton window to the left a little bit, which is awesome. Because prior to 2016, we never would have had any of these discussions before. I mean, it really changed everything. And Marianne Williamson, in 2016, I believe that she was running to help, make a difference. But now, after seeing a little bit of her interviews, she's less useful. She's not really a leftist per se. I think she's pro-Israel, and she's got some very problematic standpoints on things. But I think we'll see that if we go through her policy. I saw her on the Revolutionary Blackout Network, their interview with her, and it was really disappointing. I was kind of, she has problems with her understanding of the actual issues. Like, she's had Peter Joseph on with her, which was amazing because Peter Joseph I'm a big fan. But she really doesn't have that level of understanding. Not many people do, to be fair. But like, for a person who kind of poses as a leftist, to not have that understanding, this understanding of systems and why things are truly broken and how to fix them, it's a bit rough. It was viable opponent Marianne will bring issues instead of just take blocks of Biden. Okay, that's fair. I'm cool with that. If that's what she's really running for, I 100% support that, because Biden needs that, because he's a fucking piece of shit. Having people who are going to promote things that actually matter to the people it's a good thing. I mean, that's what Bernie did when he sold out, and so on. But sure, I definitely support her if she's doing that. I'm definitely not sending her money. I'm fairly sure. But yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have people out there pushing the issues that matter and putting pressure on them. Not that Biden or the party's going to change or do anything, but it will bring those issues to awareness. I just wonder how much of a difference she's going to make on things. I don't think she's going to have the same sort of effect that Bernie had, because Bernie's already had his effect. He's really pushed things to the left. I can't imagine that anyone, to be frank, that would be running for president could boot the Overton window even farther to the left, like actual socialism, like actual, like the sort of policies that I run on, right? No one is going to run on what I would run on and boot that Overton window to the left. No one is going to do that. Marianne's not like that. She's not leftist. Sure, she's got some good ideas. She definitely does. But yeah, if she's running for that, that's cool. We need it. We need more of that. More people, more leftists. More people to bring out leftist issues to put pressure on the establishment. Even though, the public has a very short memory. And as soon as that election's over, everyone's going to basically forget about it unless they have a continuous push for it, like Bernie Sanders did in 2016. He kept pushing for it, which is exactly what's needed. It won't move to the left, but maybe she can help. Yeah, that's yeah, that would be good. That would be good. I hope so. I mean, we need that. Yang was running. He helped. Bernie definitely did. He was the master of that. Hopefully, Marianne Williamson can help to do it. That would be good. Hopefully, we can keep having people who keep the discourse to the left instead of preventing it from sliding it to the right. That is useful in and of itself. So, yeah, I guess we'll see over the next couple election cycles if we have any people who are going to do that. It's going to be hard. A lot of people are really jaded over Bernie Sanders and the squad selling out and all that stuff. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'm bitter and jaded. We'll see. We'll see what this next. We've got. Once it starts, election season is going to start now, and then it will, kick up later on this year, and then definitely next year it'll really hit its stride. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who else is going to run for office for president, because we had Yang, we had Bernie, and we had Marianne Williamson. What else do we have? Oh, then I talked about the Green Party person too. But hopefully we'll have 4 other people that will run. 3 or 4 other people run that can help keep that Overton win. Right, that'll be cool. It's always a shit show, right? Yeah, it's always a shit show. Bunch of sociopaths. Not that Democrats aren't sociopaths, but they are. Just a matter of better marketing. But yeah, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be a massive clusterfuck because Biden is horrible. And Republicans have a lot of reasons to bitch. Democrats have a lot of reason to bitch because Biden's horrible. Kamala's... Don't even get me started on Kamala. Kamala's so bad. Okay, all right. Any last questions or comments before we call it today? Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for gifting me with your time. Yes, they do. And we were talking earlier about bitching about the squad. And Bernie, actually. And that's, but Democrats, neoliberals don't bitch about the squad. It's actual leftists that bitch about the squad. And we do get some pushback on it, but anyone who pushes back isn't leftist because, they're dealing with their brainwashing through the propaganda. So, yeah. Any other questions? Thank you for gifting me with your time, everyone. I do appreciate it so very much. And hopefully my taxes will be done by next week too. So excited to get that done. Anything else? Anybody? All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Enjoy your Easter because that's coming up. Stay safe and COVID-free, and we'll see you crazy cats next week. Bye.